with Amy in tow. Su-Nan returned quietly to his room at the tavern with Amy perched on his shoulder. The moment they entered, the little cat leaped onto the bed, rolling blissfully across the soft sheets. Meow. It's been so long since I've had a bed this comfortable. Tonight, I can finally sleep without worrying about being caught. Su-Nan raised an eyebrow and crossed his arms. True, but haven't you forgotten something important? Amy stopped mid-roll, her ears twitching. She sat up, her expression shifting to confusion before realization struck. With a gasp, she sprang to her feet. Meow. I almost forgot. I still haven't gotten my master's belongings back. The little cat jumped into Su-Nan's lap, looking up at him with wide, pleading eyes. Su-Nan, you'll help me, right? Su-Nan smiled, gently scratching under her chin. Of course. We're friends, aren't we? Meow, thank you. You're such a good person, Amy purred, leaning into his touch. After a moment of enjoying his attention, she tilted her head and asked, So, what's the plan? Tomorrow night, we'll head to the Starfire Sect's stronghold, Su-Nan explained. I'll send the infiltrator to draw their attention. While they're distracted, we'll retrieve your things and the divine blood crystal. And, he added with a grin, give them a lesson they won't forget. Amy's eyes sparkled with excitement. Meow. Let's teach them a lesson. Trusting Su-Nan implicitly, Amy seemed satisfied with the plan. She yawned, stretched out on the bed, and promptly fell into a deep sleep. Su-Nan watched her for a moment, amused by her carefree nature. Then, he sat cross-legged at the foot of the bed and began his meditation. The next day, Amy didn't stir until nearly noon. She stretched and leaped onto the table, batting at the small bell hanging from her neck. A mint leaf-shaped ice crystal materialized in her paw. She sniffed it delicately before popping it into her mouth. Her expression melted into bliss as she savored the crystal. What's that? Su-Nan asked, intrigued. Ice-congealed mint. It's delicious. Want to try? Amy said, generously offering him a piece. Su-Nan inspected the crystalline mint before slipping it into his magic cube for analysis. Ice-congealed mint. Resists heat poison when carried. Consuming it has a refreshing effect. A magical plant, Su-Nan murmured. No wonder it looks so unique. He glanced back at Amy, who was now sprawled out on the table, utterly relaxed after finishing her mint. Shaking his head with a chuckle, Su-Nan settled by the window with a book. The magic cube's capabilities had proven increasingly useful. It could store non-living, unconscious items, shielding their energy signatures, even from Amy's sharp senses. This feature had been invaluable for concealing the divine blood crystal. However, synthesizing items with the magic cube required temporarily removing all its contents, which was inconvenient. I need a proper spatial magic item, Su-Nan muttered, pushing the thought aside to focus on his reading. Evening. After a quiet meal downstairs to avoid drawing attention, Su-Nan overheard a snippet of conversation among the tavern patrons. Did you hear? The Viscount is recruiting heroes to deal with evil spirits, one man said. Evil spirits? What kind? Another asked. Apparently, Lord Cubelo's manor is haunted. Several knights have already died. There's a bounty of 1,000 gold coins. 1,000 gold coins? Someone exclaimed. I wouldn't know how to spend that much in a lifetime. Su-Nan listened intently, but kept his face neutral. Filing the information away, he returned to his room. Late at night, the streets of Stone Bell City lay still under the cover of darkness. Su-Nan stood by the window, gazing out at the quiet cityscape. Closing his book, he rose and stretched. It's time, he said. Amy perked up, leaping to her feet. Meow, I'm ready. With a nod, Su-Nan opened the window and leaped silently into the alley below. Amy appeared on his shoulder moments later. Together, they moved through the deserted streets, evading the occasional patrol with practiced ease. Soon, they reached the Starfire Sect's stronghold. The brightly lit manor loomed ahead, its wooden gates standing as a defiant barrier. Su-Nan's eyes narrowed as a cold glint flashed in them. Go, he murmured. Draw them out. Behind him, a low growl rumbled, and the air seemed to ripple as the infiltrator moved into action. Inside the manor, In the master bedroom, Priest Casper sat behind a desk, his icy gaze fixed on the 4 cultists before him. None dared to meet his eyes. 2 cultists and 20 disciples, all killed overnight. And yet, not a single clue about the attacker, Casper said, his voice low and dangerous. I'm beginning to doubt your competence. Sweat beaded on the cultists' foreheads. One stepped forward hesitantly. Priest, we've determined that most of the disciples were killed by a ferocious beast, while others showed signs of elemental attacks. We believe the assailant is a wizard. Casper's eyes narrowed. A wizard? And what are the divine blood crystals? Still missing, another cultist admitted. But we're working to locate the thief. Casper's lips curled into a scornful smile. Find them. I don't care what it takes. Failure is not an option. The cultists nodded hastily and fled the room. Casper turned to the window, gazing out at the night sky. This setback is costly, but not irreparable, he muttered. As long as we deliver the goods to Giantwood City, we can recover. A faint smile played on his lips, but it vanished in an instant as a thunderous boom echoed from the gates. Dust and debris filled the air, signaling the arrival of an uninvited guest. Boom! The deafening explosion shattered the silence of the night, reverberating through the air and echoing across the manor grounds. Dust billowed high into the sky, creating a cloud that obscured the moonlight. Su-Nan stood calmly in the distance, stroking Amy's soft fur as he watched the commotion unfold. Screams and frantic shouts soon followed, piercing the night air. He could imagine the chaos erupting within the Starfire Sect's outpost as its members rushed to the gate, only to find it empty, their confusion and fear deepening with each invisible, bloody strike from the stealthy dragon. The massacre lasted no more than 5 minutes. When it was over, the invisible stealthy dragon bolted from the manor and disappeared into the distance. 3 figures gave chase, their determination evident in their relentless pace. One figure moved with extraordinary speed, his imposing aura unmistakable. A high-ranked great knight, Su-Nan murmured, observing the leader. Most likely the priest overseeing this outpost. The other 2 are probably great knight-level cultists. He calculated swiftly. The outpost has 1 priest and 8 cultists. 2 died in Blackstone City, and 2 more last night. That leaves at most 2 cultists still in the manor. Amy's worried voice broke his thoughts. Meow. Will Little Hidden be okay? She asked, her wide eyes filled with concern for the stealthy dragon. Su-Nan's lips curled into a reassuring smile. Don't worry. It'll be fine. Little Hidden is more than capable of losing them. The stealthy dragon's ability to shift between reality and illusion gave it a decisive edge, especially in the labyrinthine streets of a town. Even a high-ranked great knight would struggle to catch it, forced instead to run in futile circles. Once Su-Nan was certain the 3 pursuers had gone far enough, he turned toward the manor. There was no need for stealth. The remaining defenders posed no threat to him. His focus was on finding his target as quickly as possible. In the manor's courtyard, chaos reigned. Starfire Sect members scrambled to tend to their wounded, their movements frantic. Their confusion turned to alarm when they noticed a man and a small cat walking calmly through the gates. One member stepped forward, weapon raised. Who are? Crackle. A bolt of lightning struck him mid-sentence, reducing him to charred remains. The courtyard erupted in chaos as more lightning and flames surged forth, engulfing the hapless defenders. Without even a single great knight among them, they stood no chance. Su-Nan's mastery over energy particles made short work of the remaining cultists. He turned to Amy, perched on his shoulder. Where is your master's belongings? Amy tilted her head, her ears twitching as she focused. After a moment, she pointed left. Meow, that way. The energy particle concentration is very high there. Su-Nan didn't hesitate, striding in the indicated direction. Along the way, more Starfire Sect members attempted to block his path, but none could slow him. He dispatched them effortlessly, his progress uninterrupted. Within minutes, he reached a sturdy iron door. Amy's paw shot out, pointing excitedly. Meow, it's behind here. Sunan splashed acid onto the door, the corrosive liquid eating through the metal until a large hole appeared. Ducking through, he descended the stairs into a spacious basement. Soft white light filled the room, cast by night pearls embedded in the ceiling. Wooden shelves lined the walls, laden with an assortment of items. Sunan's eyes immediately fell on a row of books. Magic Philosophy, Interdimensional Biology, Burning Hand, Magic Alarm, Magic Missile, Weakening Ray, Basic Magic Item Crafting, Comprehensive Low-Level Magic Item Guide, Design and Manufacturing of Mana Crystal Forging Furnace, Magic Emblem Core. His heart raced as he scanned the titles. Among them were 7 or 8 first-ring spell model books, and even a second-ring spell model book. The remaining texts contained practical knowledge, including guides for crafting magic items and blueprints for advanced equipment. Sunan's gaze lingered on design and manufacturing of Mana Crystal Forging Furnace. If he could build such a furnace, it would significantly reduce the cost of refining Blackrock beasts and pave the way for creating higher-level puppets. Suppressing his excitement, he quickly stored everything into his magic cube, including the night pearls from the ceiling. Turning to Amy, he asked, "Are all your master's belongings here?" Amy nodded enthusiastically. "Meow, they're all here." "Good. Now let's find the divine blood crystal." Amy pointed to the right without hesitation. "Meow, it's over there." Sunan paused, studying her. "You can sense it?" Amy tilted her head. "Meow, I recorded its energy fluctuations. I won't be wrong." Sunan stared at her, astonished. This ability was far beyond simple energy detection. It was akin to a treasure-finding compass. Such a skill was invaluable for locating magical items and exploring wizard legacies. His eyes gleamed as he looked at Amy, his resolve to bring her back to Blackstone City solidifying further. Oblivious to his thoughts, Amy purred happily. "Meow, let's go." Sunan nodded, exiting the basement. As he stepped through the corroded hole, twin blades flashed from the shadows, aiming for his neck.
Hey, welcome to Firescale Audiobooks. If you enjoy our audiobooks, please consider subscribing to the channel. Also, feel free to share your review in the comments section below.
SSSSH. The sword imbued with martial energy tore through the air, creating a piercing sonic boom. In the blink of an eye, Sunan found himself surrounded, trapped in a deadly situation. Yet, there wasn't a hint of panic on his face. His right hand moved like lightning, grabbing the sword that struck from the right. A dull thud echoed as the blade seemed to cut through tough leather. The martial energy glow clashed fiercely with the yellow aura, but it couldn't break through. On the other side, the long sword attacking from the left was blocked by an invisible shield, unable to advance. The two great knights' fierce attacks, prepared for so long, were easily neutralized. Are the remaining 2 cultists here? Perfect. Let's settle this together. Sunan stood up, his gaze cold as he swept over the 2 figures. The 2 cultists, still in shock, were enraged by their opponent's nonchalant attitude. They roared and charged forward again. Sunan didn't hesitate, hurling 2 rune stones. Blazing flames and dazzling lightning erupted, surging forward like dragons, instantly engulfing the 2. After a deafening roar, 2 more corpses lay on the ground. "Meow, Sunan is so awesome," Amy shouted, 666. Although the little creature was innocent, it seemed accustomed to bloody death scenes, likely due to its previous owner's bloody hands. After eliminating the 2 cultists, the remaining Starfire sect members seemed afraid and no longer dared to intervene. Sunan, enhancing his speed with wind element particles, reached the main building deep within the manor in just over 10 breaths. "The thing is on the 2nd floor." Amy's chubby paws pointed to the middle room on the 2nd floor. Sunan leaped directly from the ground, smashing through the window and entering the room. Following Amy's instructions, he then broke through a wall and found a secret chamber. n/o/vel/b/jan.c//om. Inside, the only things present were a stone platform and 3 chests. The item on the stone platform was the divine blood crystal he was searching for. 24 in total. Sunan took them all without hesitation. Adding them to his previous stash, he now had 26 divine blood crystals. As Sunan opened the other 3 chests, his eyes lit up. Golden coins. All 3 chests were overflowing with gold, likely exceeding 2,000 coins. These guys are quite wealthy, huh? Sunan sighed, then stuffed all the gold into the magic cube. After finishing this, he quickly left the main building and sprinted towards the manor's exit. Not long ago, Infiltrator had sent a message. The 3 people pursuing him seemed to have noticed something was wrong and were rushing towards the manor. Unfortunately, they were destined to be too late. Leaving the manor, Sunan didn't stop, disappearing into the night in the blink of an eye. Not long after, 3 figures stormed into the manor, heading directly for the main building. Upon seeing the empty secret chamber, Casper nearly fainted. Damn thief! Beast! Coming back to his senses, a furious Casper smashed the nearby desk with his sword. The 2 cultists behind him, speechless, hung their heads, fearful of attracting his wrath. Just then, a Starfire sect member rushed in, his face pale with panic. Priest, bad news. We found the bodies of Braun and Lori in the warehouse. Before he could finish, Casper flashed to the member, grabbed his collar, and asked with a grim expression, "The underground warehouse. Did anything happen there?" The member was startled, stammering. The 2 priests' bodies were in front of the underground warehouse door. Everything inside the warehouse was taken. A bunch of useless trash. Before the member could finish, a furious Casper slapped him on the forehead. The unfortunate soul didn't even have time to groan before collapsing, instantly dead. "Damn you! I'll find you!" Casper's furious roar echoed through the night. While Casper raged uncontrollably, Sunan had already returned to his room at the tavern, completely undetected. Meanwhile, Infiltrator also returned to the vicinity of the tavern, finding a place to hide. After checking to ensure no one had entered the room in his absence, Sunan sat down and laid out his spoils from the night. Looking at the 20-plus divine blood crystals on the table, Sunan was overjoyed. He opened the magic cube, placing the divine blood crystals inside one by one, his gaze fixed on the synthesis interface information. After placing 6 divine blood crystals, the synthesis interface information finally changed significantly. Divine blood crystal, divine blood content 0.4 milliliters. Carrying it on your person can significantly increase the attraction to energy particles, has a low level of mental pollution. Long-term close contact can cause changes in thinking and cognition, leading to faith in the source of divine blood. Compared to before, the divine blood crystal's attraction to energy particles now included the word significantly, and mental pollution had been significantly reduced. Excited, Sunan poured the remaining divine blood crystals into the magic cube. The synthesis interface information changed again, significantly. Divine blood crystal, divine blood content 1.3 milliliters. Upon contact with air, it can attract stray energy particles, forming a high-concentration energy zone. Being in this zone will cause slight auditory and visual hallucinations. Mental strength above 18 can become immune. Success! Sunan was ecstatic. The synthesized divine blood crystal's mental pollution side effects had completely vanished, leaving only slight auditory and visual hallucinations. Sunan guessed those were the prayer voices he had heard and the magnificent palace he had seen. But as long as there was no mental pollution, a little auditory and visual hallucination was perfectly acceptable. Besides, once his mental strength reached 18, these side effects would become immune. Compared to the initial divine blood crystal, the final synthesized product was undoubtedly much better. Without hesitation, Sunan chose to synthesize. The moment he took the synthesized divine blood crystal from the magic cube, he distinctly felt the stray energy particles in the air rapidly gathering around it, forming a concentrated energy zone about 2 meters in radius, centered on the divine blood crystal. Bathing in the concentrated energy particles, Sunan felt his spirit clearer and more active than ever before. Even without consciously absorbing them, numerous energy particles were already entering his body and the depths of his sea of consciousness. strengthening his physique while filling the star ring. Meditating in this environment, the efficiency will at least double, maybe even triple. A wave of intense joy surged through Su Nan's chest. The effect of the synthesized product was even better than he expected. With the Divine Blood Crystal, he could reduce his time to advance to third-rank Wizard Apprentice by at least half. Just the Divine Blood Crystal alone made his trip to Stone Bell City worthwhile. Meow, what's going on? Why are all the energy particles gathering around you? Amy quickly noticed the anomaly around Su Nan, jumping off the table in surprise, staring at the Divine Blood Crystal in the latter's hand. That Divine Blood Crystal is strange. It seems different somehow. I made some small modifications to it. Involving his personal secrets, Su Nan didn't explain much, simply giving a vague answer before putting away the Divine Blood Crystal, turning his attention to the things on the table. The items left by Amy's mysterious owner were mostly books or magical items. He had already skimmed the books, but the magical items he hadn't had time to carefully examine due to the urgency of the situation. Now, with some leisure, he took each item and carefully inspected it. There were 18 magic items in total. Half of them were jewelry. The rest were cloaks, robes, weapons, and other relatively large items. To Su Nan's dismay, most of these magic items were completely damaged. They seemed to have existed for a long time. The magic runes on their surfaces were worn away by time, and the magic properties they contained had long since dissipated. Only 2 magic items had relatively lightly worn magic runes. With some repair, they could probably still be used. Judging from the number and complexity of the magic runes, these 2 magic items were at least magic grade, that is, true wizard artifacts. But even after being repaired, they would only be at the level of sub-magic items. What a pity! Su Nan sighed, then felt a little confused. It's impossible for a wizard artifact to naturally erode to this extent without thousands of years. Does Amy's master have a hobby of collecting old artifacts? Su Nan turned to look at Amy, holding up the ring in his hand, and asked, "Amy, do you recognize this ring?" Amy glanced at it and nodded. "I do. It's a wizard artifact that the master made not long ago. I saw it in the lab before I went to sleep. Strange. Why is it so dirty?" Su Nan was taken aback. "When you saw the ring before? It was new." "Yes. Are you sure you haven't mistaken it?" Amy thought for a moment and nodded forcefully. "Absolutely not." Su Nan couldn't help but take a deep breath. There was no doubt that the corrosion marks on the ring were formed naturally. If Amy was telling the truth, then this ring was made 1,000 years ago, and Amy's master, the wizard who made this ring, was very likely one of the wizards who left Starlight Continent and went on an expedition to the multiverse 1,000 years ago. Wait, Su Nan quickly realized. Amy's master left while Amy was sleeping, which meant Amy had been sleeping for 1,000 years. This little guy was actually over 1,000 years old. Amy suddenly noticed that Su Nan was looking at her with a look of amazement. The look was as if she was looking at some extremely rare creature. "What's wrong, Meow?" The little guy tilted her head in confusion. Su Nan remained silent for a moment and asked, "Amy, have you ever seen a wizard other than your master?" "Of course I have. Many of the master's friends are wizards, and there are many wizard apprentices as well. I see them every day, but they are all gone with the master now. Speaking of which, it's so strange, Meow. There used to be so many wizards and wizard apprentices on the streets, but I haven't seen a single one since I woke up. You're the first wizard apprentice I've met. Are there very few wizards in this town?" The case was solved. This little guy really lived for 1,000 years. However, Su Nan didn't understand why Amy's master would leave her alone on Starlight Continent. Why the little guy slept for 1,000 years? Although he had deduced part of Amy's origin, there were even more incomprehensible questions. As if sensing something from Su Nan's expression, Amy asked in confusion, "What's wrong, Meow?" After hesitating for a moment, Su Nan still told Amy about the wizards leaving Starlight Continent. Upon hearing this, the little guy froze in place, her eyes glazed over. "A master left Starlight Continent and abandoned me. Why? Did Amy do something wrong?" Su Nan comforted her. Maybe your master didn't want to abandon you. Maybe there were compelling reasons for him to do so. Look, your master left so many things behind, which means he must have left in a hurry. Hearing this, Amy's eyes lit up, and she nodded forcefully. That's right, meow. I usually don't sleep for that long. The master must have done something. If the master wanted to abandon me, there was no need to do this. That's right. Sunan followed the little guy's train of thought. Having confirmed that her master hadn't really abandoned her, Amy regained her vitality and muttered to herself, as if she was cheering herself up, "Master will definitely come back. I will wait here for the master." Sunan thought to himself, that's quite possible. Thousands of years later, with the revival of the elements, the wizards who left would return to Starlight Continent. Perhaps Amy's master would be among them. In that case, Amy, do you want to come to my place? Meow. Sunan's place? Amy was tempted but also hesitated. But what if the master comes back and can't find me? Sunan smiled. You're your master's magical companion, right? Yes. Then that's fine. There's a contract sense between wizards and magical companions. If your master comes back, he won't be able to find you. That makes sense. Amy realized. Sunan continued to persuade her. Besides, if you stay here, people from the Starfire sect might come to catch you again. It's better to leave with me. Go to a place where they can't find you. In fact, Amy no longer had the divine blood crystal, and the people from the Starfire sect could no longer track her through the blood connection. However, Amy, with her simple-minded intelligence, couldn't think of this at all. She only felt that Sunan's words made sense. Plus, she had a good feeling about Sunan, who had helped her twice, so she didn't hesitate and happily agreed. Seeing this, Sunan's eyes flashed with a smile. Although he had his own selfish motives, he was also doing it for Amy's good. The little guy was too naive and didn't understand much about the current Starlight Continent. It would be easy for her to suffer if she lived alone. After all, malicious perception wasn't omnipotent. It was better for her to follow him. At least she could eat and sleep well. In any case, he wouldn't mistreat her. After the excitement, Amy felt a little embarrassed and said, "But Sunan, wouldn't this be too much trouble for you?" "How could it be?" Sunan smiled slightly, then pointed at the things on the table. "But if you really feel bad, why don't you lend me these things for now? When your master comes back, you can have them back." "No problem," Amy agreed without thinking. After all, these things were useless to her. "By the way, let's go to your master's place tomorrow to have a look. Maybe we can find some clues about your master's departure." It was rare to find the residence of a wizard from 1,000 years ago. Sunan naturally wouldn't miss this opportunity. Maybe he could find something valuable to n/o/vel/b//and.c//om. Amy didn't doubt him and readily agreed. There were still 4 or 5 hours before dawn, and Sunan didn't want to waste time. He sat down cross-legged on the bed, held the divine blood crystal, and began to meditate. For hours later, he opened his eyes and immediately checked his panel. Meditation proficiency increased by 287 points, almost 3.5 times the previous amount. Spiritual power increased by 0.04. Not bad. Sunan nodded with satisfaction. At this rate, he would be able to build the 4-star ring in less than a month. If I could make a second-order revitalization potion, the efficiency could be increased even more. Just right. I got more than 2,000 gold coins from the Starfire sect. I'll try to synthesize a higher-order potion when I get back. In fact, Sunan had also considered opening his own magic plant garden, planting silver moonflowers on a large scale to make lower-grade revitalization potions, which would greatly reduce costs. However, planting and cultivating magic plants wasn't like ordinary plants. It wasn't just a matter of getting a piece of land and hiring a few people. In addition to a series of common environmental factors such as climate, soil, and humidity, planting magic plants also involved energy density. With the current energy density of Starlight Continent, small-scale planting of magic plants was barely possible. To plant them on a large scale, rune formations would have to be set up to gather energy particles, artificially increasing the energy density. It was precisely because of the difficulty of cultivation that the price of silver moon flowers remained high. This was because silver moonflowers weren't considered particularly precious magic plants. If it were a more precious magic plant, the caretakers would also have to possess some knowledge of magic plant cultivation. In short, establishing a magic plant garden wasn't something that could be done overnight. At least Blackstone City didn't have the manpower or resources for Su Nan to establish a magic plant garden. I'll consider this after I take back Shining Light territory. Night passed, and dawn arrived. As the sky was just starting to brighten, Su Nan left the tavern with Amy. Amy's owner, the mysterious wizard, lived in the spiky stone valley east of Stonebell City, that n/o/vel/b/c/om. After traveling more than 10 kilometers out of the city, there was a pine forest. Following the dense trees eastward, they crossed two mountain peaks and entered the spiky stone valley. The deeper they went into the valley, the more desolate the environment became, and the terrain grew increasingly rugged. There was almost no vegetation on the surface, only jagged spiky stones everywhere. Withered grass and thorns grew from the cracks in the rock walls, making a creaking sound as the mountain breeze blew past. Su Nan wondered why the wizard would choose such a desolate place to live. But then he thought about the fact that this was 1,000 years ago. Maybe the spiky stone valley wasn't like this 1,000 years ago. Amy lay quietly on Su Nan's shoulder, licking her paw listlessly. Finally, after the sun rose from behind the distant mountains, they reached a river beach. Meow, follow the river, and you'll get there, Amy pointed ahead. Su Nan didn't move immediately, but ordered the hidden dragon nearby to scout ahead. This place had long been known to the Starfire sect. If they wanted to capture them, they would most likely send someone here to lie in wait. It was better to be safe than sorry. However, after a round of searching, no one was found hiding nearby. Looks like those guys haven't recovered from last night's fight yet. Su Nan relaxed, confidently heading towards the river upstream. Following Amy's directions, he quickly found a cave in the middle of a rock wall. With the addition of wind element energy particles, Su Nan easily climbed the rock wall and entered the cave. The cave was pitch black, but the passage was very smooth and spacious, showing signs of artificial construction everywhere. Su Nan casually took out a night pearl as a light source and stepped inside. At the end of the passage was a spacious ring-shaped hall. The floor was paved with square granite tiles, engraved with dense, strange patterns, like some kind of large magic array. However, many of the patterns had faded and blurred, and the magic array was no longer able to activate. There were more than 10 doorways on the surrounding walls. That door behind is the apprentice living area. The wizard apprentices usually rest there. That leads to the plantation. There used to be many strange magic plants in it, and many little sprites, but they're all gone now. That's the warehouse, and that's the magic experiment square. Amy introduced each door and what it led to Su Nan, as if she were very familiar with the place. The entire building was unusually large, with passages leading in all directions and countless rooms. It could be considered a castle built inside the mountain. Judging from the residual marks resembling crystal marks on the walls, this should have been a building similar to a wizard tower. However, it was now dilapidated and decaying. Su Nan was originally thinking about whether he could find a bargain here, but he found nothing on his way. The Starfire sect's operational capabilities were higher than he expected. They had directly emptied the place, not leaving a single valuable thing behind. It's a pity that this place is too remote and the surrounding environment is too desolate. Otherwise, I could have built a laboratory and magic plant garden here. Su Nan thought regretfully. Since he couldn't find anything valuable, he didn't stay any longer and turned to leave with Amy. As he walked out of the cave, Su Nan suddenly remembered something and asked Amy, "The Starfire sect said you've been wandering around the north of the city. Why?" Amy was stunned for a moment, then cried out, "Meow. I almost forgot. There's something I haven't gotten back." Su Nan was surprised. "What is it?" "It's the bloody mandrake. Those bad guys took this magic plant, and I don't know why they left it in a big house. I wanted to get it back, but there was a very powerful evil spirit guarding it. I couldn't beat it." Bloody mandrake. Su Nan was startled. As he remembered, it was a very evil magic plant that fed on human blood. Every time it matured, its roots would turn red, until they became as red as blood. Once it fully matured, the bloody mandrake would release hidden mental waves, creating illusions to lure nearby creatures and devour their souls. After devouring enough souls, a terrifying evil spirit would be born within the bloody mandrake, starting to kill nearby humans and devour their souls to strengthen itself. It was precisely because of this characteristic that places where bloody mandrake was cultivated were generally set up with corresponding restrictive magic arrays. Otherwise, it would ultimately lead to an evil spirit disaster. Thinking back to the ghost stories he heard at the tavern, Sunin suddenly understood. The big house Amy was referring to was most likely Baron Cubero's manor. It seems that the Starfire sect planned to put the bloody mandrake in that manor. But what was their purpose in doing so? After a moment's thought, Sunin quickly figured out the connection. Stone Bell City was the center of the Silver Moon territory, and the Viscount of Silver Moon happened to be one of the nobles who was at odds with the Marquis of Golden Rock. If an evil spirit appeared in his own territory, the Viscount of Silver Moon would have to find a way to deal with it. Otherwise, if they left it alone, the evil spirit's harm would soon escalate, eventually threatening the entire Stone Bell City. However, relying solely on the power of knights to eliminate an evil spirit, it was unknown how many lives would have to be sacrificed. Even if they finally succeeded in removing the evil spirit, the Silver Moon territory would surely be severely damaged. At that time, the Marquis of Golden Rock and the Starfire sect could take advantage of the situation. This evil spirit incident was most likely another part of the Marquis of Golden Rock's plot to control the Golden Rock province. This guy really can't stop bothering people. Sunin muttered to himself. Then his mind became active again. Although the bloody mandrake was very harmful, it was also a very rare magic plant with many uses. For example, in Angus MacLean's diary, he saw a formula for an evil illusion potion that could increase spiritual power. The main ingredient was the sap of the bloody mandrake. The bloody mandrake that Angus MacLean had been looking for decades was found in this situation. It was ironic, to say the least. Among the materials for making the evil illusion potion, the bloody mandrake is the rarest. The other materials can be completely obtained through magic cube synthesis. As long as I get this bloody mandrake, I can produce evil illusion potions continuously. Sunan was suddenly excited, but he quickly calmed down. Evil spirits are not easy to deal with. It's best to prepare some more trump cards before going. Sunan thought of the 2 half-damage magic items he had just obtained last night. If he could repair those 2 magic items, it would undoubtedly be easier to deal with the evil spirit. Besides, he couldn't just help the Silver Moon territory solve the problem for nothing. He should get the reward he deserved. Silver Moon Inner Keep, Council Chamber. Silver Moon Viscount sat alone in the hall, rubbing his temples. He sighed, his brow furrowed in worry. He hadn't slept well since the spirit incident. Those ignorant lower-class people just thought that the Cabero Manor was haunted, and they used it as a topic for idle chatter. Only he knew how serious the situation really was. It was a spirit, a legendary, evil, undead creature. If not handled properly, the entire Stone Bell City might become a ghost realm. He had already lost a great knight and 5 nights to deal with the spirit in the manor. It was painful to the point of bleeding. Yet, even with such a heavy sacrifice, the spirit was still alive and well. It even became more ferocious and terrifying after consuming the souls of 6 knights. If the spirit wasn't eliminated soon, things would only get worse. Thinking about this, Silver Moon Viscount couldn't help but gnash his teeth in hatred for Cabero, who had been imprisoned. If it wasn't for this fool's inability to control his wife, allowing her to be deceived by the Starfire sect and bring the evil Crimson Flower into the manor, and then later, because he was afraid of damaging his reputation, he concealed the news of the deaths, things would never have reached an irreversible state. This self-destructive fool, even if he was killed 10 times, it wouldn't quench the anger in his heart. Taking a few deep breaths, Silver Moon Viscount calmed his anger and asked the scribe beside him, "Have all the recruits arrived?" "Yes, my lord," the scribe bowed and said. "They are all waiting in the reception hall." Silver Moon Viscount nodded and stood up, walking outside. To eliminate the spirit, relying solely on the strength of his subordinates wouldn't be enough. He had to recruit mercenaries or wandering knights from outside. When dealing with powerful and terrifying spirits, every extra knight was a valuable asset. It would be a pity if he could find a wizard. Not those who called themselves wizards, but were actually charlatans who could only fool people. He was looking for a real wizard. They were the true professionals when it came to dealing with spirits. But wizards were always secretive, and for a moment, Silvermoon Viscount didn't know where to find one. I heard that the second son of the former Shining Light Baron became a wizard. I wonder if that's true or just a rumor. As he pondered, Silvermoon Viscount had already arrived at the reception hall. He glanced around, and there were about 20 people in the hall. Almost all of them were middle-aged men in their 30s, wearing armor. Knights who weren't from noble families had inferior quality when cultivating their breathing technique and lacked resources. They usually reached the rank of knight in their 30s. Furthermore, knight was usually the peak for them. Unless they had a lucky encounter, they would never be able to advance to great knight in their lifetime. So, among those sitting in the hall, it was good enough if there was a peak knight. They shouldn't expect to see any great knight. However, one person's attire was quite conspicuous, attracting Silvermoon Viscount's attention. That person was wearing a thin gray robe, and his face was covered with a night owl mask, making him stand out among the armored knights. However, since everyone in the hall had passed the initial assessment, ensuring that they had the strength level of a knight, Silvermoon Viscount didn't say anything more. He went straight to the seat at the back of the hall, sat down, and gestured to the scribe. The scribe immediately stepped forward, looked around, and said, "First of all, we would like to thank everyone for coming to the recruitment. We have explained the details in the recruitment notice, but we still need to remind everyone that the spirit in the Cabero Manor is very powerful. It is as strong as a knight. If you are not careful, you will die. Even so, are you all still willing to participate?" Everyone's faces remained unchanged. The news of the deaths of several knights in the Cabero Manor had spread like wildfire in Stonebell City. They were undoubtedly aware of the situation. They came to the recruitment despite this, indicating that they had already made up their minds. "I have only one question," a burly man said in a deep voice. "Is the reward of 1,000 gold coins real?" The scribe glanced at the man and nodded. "Of course, it's real. The 1,000 gold coins will be divided among all of you based on your strength. If anyone unfortunately dies in the manor, we will also deliver the money to their designated family members." Upon hearing this, the knights present all showed signs of joy. 20 people dividing 1,000 gold coins. Even the weakest among them would get 20 or 30 gold coins, right? That was almost equivalent to their income for 3 or 4 years. At this moment, a voice suddenly rang out. "If I'm the only one who participates, will all 1,000 gold coins be mine?" As soon as these words were spoken, the atmosphere in the hall became stagnant. Everyone looked in the direction of the voice and found that the speaker was the masked individual who was standing out from the crowd. "TSK, such a big mouth. Do you know what you're saying? Want to swallow the 1,000 gold coins alone? Hey, I wonder if you have the strength for that. I haven't seen such a cocky guy in a long time. /o/vel/b/c/c/om. Countless eyes filled with malice converged on the masked individual. In this day and age, who among the mercenaries and wandering knights was easy to mess with? Seeing someone more arrogant than themselves, many people were instantly dissatisfied. "Kid, if you want to swallow the reward alone, first get past me." A burly man with broad shoulders and a thick back stepped forward, patted the iron axe on his back, and looked at the masked individual with ill intent. "Seeing how cocky you are, you must have some skills. Why don't we have a fight? Whoever loses kneels and barks like a dog, then quits. How about it?" Some recognized the burly man as a well-known wandering knight whose strength had already reached the level of a high-ranking knight. They looked at the masked individual with a hint of schadenfreude. "That's a good suggestion. Let's have a fight. Whoever chickens out is a coward." "Kid, quickly agree. You wouldn't be scared, would you?" The knights were all clamoring. Silvermoon Viscount watched this scene with a cold eye, without intervening. To be honest, he was also curious about the masked individual's background. People who dared to say such things in such a situation were either fools or very confident in their abilities. His intuition told him that the masked individual was not the former. Under the watchful eyes of everyone, the masked individual, or rather, Su Nan, simply nodded calmly. That's a good suggestion. Let's do it. Su Nan raised his head, met the burly man's gaze, and a strange light appeared in the eyes behind his mask. Now you can kneel and bark like a dog. The burly man's sneer quickly disappeared, and his facial features instantly became stiff. Before everyone could react, the burly man slowly knelt on the ground. Silence. The hall was completely silent. Everyone stared at the scene in front of them, their mouths agape, unable to speak. What happened? Before the fight even began, why did this guy surrender? In the hall, only Baron Silvermoon's eyes suddenly lit up, as if he had thought of something. A hint of joy flashed across his face. What did you do to him? A man who seemed to be a friend of the brawny man rushed forward, pulling the brawny man up from the ground. His eyes filled with anger as he glared at Su Nan. Su Nan said calmly, "Just a little trick." "What, do you want to try it too?" Facing Su Nan's indifferent gaze, the man's expression froze. His words stuck in his throat. At this moment, the brawny man regained consciousness. Recalling his actions just now, his face turned beet red. He roared and pulled out the battle axe on his back, charging towards Su Nan. Everyone was startled. Two knights guarding Baron Silvermoon's side were about to stop him, but the next second, they saw Su Nan wave his hand. A dazzling ray of lightning appeared out of thin air, piercing the void and striking the brawny man. Crackle! In the blink of an eye, the latter fell to the ground, charred black, his life or death unknown. The hall fell silent once more. Everyone stared blankly at the brawny man on the ground, unable to recover for a while. A high-ranking knight was defeated so easily? What kind of technique was that lightning? Clap, clap, clap. The sound of applause suddenly broke the silence, bringing everyone back to their senses. Turning their heads to see, it was Baron Silvermoon who had stood up and applauded, his face full of smiles as he looked at Su Nan. "You have excellent skills, as you said. As long as you can eliminate that evil spirit, the bounty will all be yours." As soon as these words were spoken, the faces of the knights instantly turned ugly. However, no one objected. Not to mention that Baron Silvermoon had already made his decision, and they were not qualified to oppose, but the power Su Nan displayed alone had already made them reluctant to resist. Some of the more experienced knights had already vaguely realized Su Nan's identity. They knew they had no chance, so they turned around and left without a word. Soon, except for Su Nan, all the knights recruited had left the hall. Baron Silvermoon didn't mind, his eyes fixed on Su Nan as he asked, "What is your name, esteemed guest?" "Angor McLean." "If I'm not mistaken, Angor, you are a wizard?" "That's right." "Excellent." Although he had already guessed, Baron Silvermoon was still excited when he heard Su Nan admit it personally. "With you, we are sure to eliminate that evil spirit." "The evil spirit is not a problem," Su Nan said calmly. "But before eliminating the evil spirit, I have other conditions. N/O/vel/B/C//OM. Please speak, esteemed guest. The bounty of 1,000 gold coins. I want it paid to me in advance, in exchange for the equivalent value of goods I specify." Baron Silvermoon only hesitated for a moment before readily agreeing. "No problem. What do you want to exchange it for?" Su Nan handed over a list, which included the materials needed to make the lower-grade revitalization potion, as well as a set of potion-making tools. The magic cube had limited space, and he didn't bring the making tools this time, so he had to buy another set. Baron Silvermoon glanced at the list, and finding that it wasn't anything rare, he secretly breathed a sigh of relief, smiled, and said, "I'll have someone procure the goods as soon as possible. You can rest in my manor for now." Su Nan didn't refuse and agreed. Baron Silvermoon then called his butler, instructing him to lead Su Nan to the prepared room and ensure he was well served. After Su Nan left the hall, one of the remaining two great knights under Baron Silvermoon finally couldn't help but say, Your lordship, are you really trusting him? What if he takes the goods and runs? The speaker was one of the remaining two great knights under Baron Silvermoon. Seeing him raise this question, Baron Silvermoon was not angry, but smiled and asked, Ubano, if you were to fight him, what are your chances of winning? Ubano hesitated for a moment before honestly saying, less than 50%. His methods are too bizarre. I can't see through them. Although he could also kill a high-ranking knight in an instant, he couldn't do it as easily as Sun Nan. Moreover, Sun Nan clearly hadn't used his full strength. The scene of the brawny man being controlled like a puppet, kneeling down and barking like a dog was still vivid in his mind. Such skills were truly uncanny. Baron Silvermoon shook his head with a smile, patted Ubano on the shoulder, and said meaningfully, You will undoubtedly lose. Seeing that Ubano was a little unconvinced, he smiled without saying anything and turned to enter the side door of the hall. People who don't understand wizards have no idea how bizarre and terrifying this group's power is. It's a power beyond human comprehension, belonging to another world. Baron Silvermoon was very efficient. The next day, a large amount of Silvermoon flowers was delivered to Sun Nan. After instructing the butler not to let anyone disturb him, Sun Nan began making potions. The materials worth nearly 1,000 gold coins were eventually refined into 102 bottles of lower-grade revitalization potion. Sun Nan then began to synthesize. As he expected, when he put in 22 bottles of lower-grade revitalization potion, the revitalization potion on the synthesis interface had become a first-rank superior. The effect and duration were both extended. However, the mental power requirement increased to 8 points. Sun Nan did not stop, continuing to put potions into the magic cube. When the number reached 58 bottles, the synthesis interface suddenly changed. Super Ability Potion, second rank / inferior. After taking it, it can greatly improve mental activity and enhance the absorption efficiency of energy particles, prolonging the meditation time. Duration: 48 days and 4 hours. Stacking has no effect. The user's mental power must be at least 13. Not bad. Sun Nan's heart rejoiced. This potion's effect was far better than the revitalization potion, especially the effect of enhancing the absorption efficiency of energy particles combined with the Divine Blood Amber would definitely have a 1+1 greater than 2 effect. Furthermore, the duration was also extended by nearly half. I wonder what the effects of the medium and superior are. Sun Nan continued to add potions. When the potion quantity reached 85 bottles, the super ability potion became a second-rank medium. The effect description did not change significantly. Only the duration was increased to 54 days, and the mental power requirement became 15 or higher. When the potion quantity reached 105 bottles, Sun Nan also added in the rest of his potions. The super ability potion finally became a second-rank superior. Super ability potion, second rank / superior. After taking it, it can greatly improve mental activity and greatly enhance the absorption efficiency of energy particles, prolonging the meditation time. Duration: 62 days and 10 hours. Stacking has no effect. The user's mental power must be at least 18. 18 mental power requirement. Sun Nan shook his head regretfully. His current mental power was not even 16. Even if he synthesized a second-rank superior super ability potion, he couldn't take it. But soon he cheered up. Being able to synthesize a second-rank medium super ability potion was already very good. It was sufficient for now. When his mental power broke through 18, it wouldn't be too late to synthesize a second-rank superior super ability potion. A bottle of second-rank medium super ability potion costs around 850 gold coins, and the effect only lasts for a little less than 2 months, about 5,000 or 6,000 gold coins a year. Sun Nan couldn't help but sigh. At just level 2 wizard apprentice, the expenses were so high, he couldn't imagine how much gold he would need to spend every year after advancing to wizard. Spending is a big thing, but to improve his strength, Sun Nan never hesitated to spend money. After consuming the super ability potion, his meditation efficiency reached an astonishing level. After 4 hours of meditation, The proficiency of the Star Ring meditation method directly surged by 514 points, and his spiritual power also increased by 0.06. The efficiency was more than 6 times higher than when he was in Blackstone City. The Super Ability Potion and Divine Blood Amber have excellent compatibility. Su Nan was overjoyed. Besides meditation, the effect of the Super Ability Potion also significantly boosted his progress in learning magic. In just one day, the learning progress of Magic Missile exceeded 5%. This meant that he could master a new first ring spell within 20 days at most. High-level resources are truly the guarantee for rapid strength improvement. Su Nan breathed a sigh of relief, delighted, and decided to stay in the Baron of Silva Moon's mansion for a while, making thorough preparations before entering the manor to deal with the evil spirit. In the following days, Su Nan settled down in the mansion. Apart from meditating and learning magic, he repaired magical items, occasionally teased Amy, and petted the cat. As for the infiltrator, he was released from Stone Bell City and sent to hunt for food in the nearby mountains. Under the dual boost of the Super Ability Potion and Divine Blood Amber, the proficiency of the Star Ring meditation method soared like a rocket. On the 13th day in the mansion, the Star Ring meditation method successfully reached level 5. Su Nan also successfully built his 4th star ring. Su Nan Arnest, human male, 17 years old. Spirit 17.34/Constitution 13.77. Skills. Star Ring Meditation Method LV5 35/30,000. Potion Making LV3 727/6000. Biomodification LV2 319/3000. Puppetry Refining LV2 1701/3000. 30,000 proficiency. I can max it out in less than 2 months. The thought of building the 5th star ring soon filled Su Nan with joy. On the 20th day in the mansion, Su Nan successfully mastered Magic Missile. This was his first offensive first ring spell. Magic Missile Effect. It shoots highly condensed energy particles from the palm, and the number and power of the missiles depend on the caster's spiritual power and casting proficiency. The magic appearing on the panel meant that the casting proficiency had already reached the level of complete mastery. With Su Nan's spiritual power approaching 18, he could simultaneously release a maximum of 3 magic missiles. He had tested it, and a single magic missile could pierce through 2 centimeters of black iron plate. Even a great knight wearing heavy armor would definitely not feel good after taking a magic missile. When my spiritual power increases in the future, I will be able to release dozens of magic missiles simultaneously, forming a barrage attack. That's when the power will be terrifying. Amy's owner left behind a total of 8 books on Magic Model. Besides Magic Missile, there were also Burning Hand, Magic Alarm, Weakening Ray, Understand Language, Magical Disguise, 7-Colored Spiritual Light, and Featherfall. Among them, only Burning Hand, Weakening Ray, and 7-Colored Spiritual Light were combat-oriented spells. Su Nan pondered and decided to learn Weakening Ray next. Although rune gems were powerful, each use consumed more than 10 gold coins. In a battle, it often consumed gems worth 50 to 60 gold coins. Too expensive. Su Nan decided to use magic and energy particle manipulation to fight whenever possible. Unless he encountered a tough enemy, he would use rune gems. Otherwise, even a fortune wouldn't last with such consumption. Unfortunately, super magic techniques require enough spiritual power to master, and I can only cultivate them after advancing to a 3rd-rank wizard apprentice. Otherwise, mastering spell silent casting and spell instant casting would make it much easier to cast spells in battle. On the 25th day in the mansion, Su Nan finally finished repairing the 2 magical items. He placed the repaired magical items in the magic cube, and the corresponding information quickly appeared. Protective Ring, Alchemy/minor magical item. Activates to form an invisible protective force field on the body. Number of uses 3/3. Can be restored by injecting spiritual power or automatically absorbing free energy particles. Magic Coin, Alchemy/minor magical item. activates to randomly summon a creature from another world, obeying the user's instructions. The creature will disappear after serving the user for half an hour or dying. N/O/vel/B//B/Jin C//OM. The protective ring looked like an ordinary copper ring, very inconspicuous. This was in line with the wizard's pursuit of practicality. They often liked to make magical items less noticeable so that the enemy wouldn't pay too much attention to them in battle, giving them an early advantage. Sunan tested it and found that the protective force field generated by the protective ring was not low in defense, almost as good as shield spell. However, its advantage over shield spell was that it had a larger defense area and could provide 360-degree protection against attacks from all directions without blind spots. Unlike shield spell, which could only defend against attacks from a single direction, if it encountered attacks from multiple directions simultaneously, it could not block them all. Counting the protective ring, Sunan now had 2 ring-type minor magical items in his possession. The other magic coin was a rare summoning-type magical item with an effect similar to level 1 summoning technique. The good thing was that the creature summoned by the magic coin had a strength level between a junior Great Knight and a peak Great Knight. This was much stronger than level 1 summoning technique. In Sunan's opinion, the magic coin was actually very close to a Twilight-level magical item. During the process of repairing these 2 magical items, Sunan's magical item manufacturing learning progress also reached 100%, and he successfully mastered this skill. Just in time, I got a copy of a complete guide to low-level magical items earlier. I can try to manufacture magical items after I go back to Blackstone City. A powerful wizard would certainly have a large number of magical items. After all, even the most talented wizard couldn't be without weaknesses. The weak points in the battle system had to be made up for with magical items. Preparations complete. The next step is to deal with the evil spirit. With the magic coin and protective ring, Sunan felt more confident about his upcoming actions. When the Baron of Silva Moon received a report from the steward that Lord Ong said he could act, he was truly relieved. Although the other party had told him beforehand that he needed to prepare for a while to ensure the complete solution of the evil spirit. Seeing that 20-plus days had passed, and Ong still showed no signs of action, he couldn't help but become increasingly anxious. Every day that passed, the evil spirit in Cubero Manor grew stronger. If it dragged on too long, it might reach an irreversible point. Luckily, the wizard finally agreed to act. The Baron of Silver Moon immediately decided, gather everyone, Cubero Manor. In just a month or two, this once bustling manor had fallen into complete disrepair. It was still bearable during the day, but at night, it was filled with ghostly apparitions. The soldiers tasked with guarding the manor would hear faint, eerie cries every night, as if female ghosts were wailing and moaning, making them unable to sleep. If it weren't for their superiors, the soldiers would have fled long ago. Baron Silvermoon had once sent people to investigate, but a great knight and 5 knights went in, and only 1 knight emerged alive, and even he was mentally unstable. Standing not far from the manor, Baron Silvermoon, recalling the lost great knight and knights, felt a pang of regret. What's the situation inside now? Sunan asked. The secretary standing beside him quickly replied, the manor is now overgrown with mandrakes, and most of the original plants have withered and died. There is also a faint mist that appears sometimes during the day. Sunan's eyes narrowed slightly. Mandrakes are beautiful and alluring, and they can also be used medicinally, but they are also poisonous plants and have hallucinogenic effects. The mandrakes that grew alongside the blood mandrake in the manor were certainly more toxic and hallucinogenic than ordinary mandrakes. Now, the entire manor was filled with the pollen and strange fragrance of these mandrakes, turning the entire environment into a highly toxic zone. Anyone below the rank of knight entering would likely die from poisoning before they could go far. Even for knights and great knights, in such an environment, it would be good if they could exert 6 or 7 out of 10 of their strength. Lord Ong, what do you plan to do? Baron Silvermoon asked. Sunan cast a shield spell on himself, casually saying, Just wait outside." Baron Silvermoon was taken aback. "Don't you need me to send people in with you?" "No need." Sunan waved his hand dismissively. Knights wouldn't be of much use in the haunt of an evil spirit. They would only hinder him. He didn't want to be in the middle of a battle with an evil spirit, only to find that his allies had been controlled by illusions and turned into enemies stabbing him in the back. Taking out a rune gem and holding it in his palm, Sunan strode toward the manor. He had left Shadow Dragon and Amy outside. Evil spirits relied on perception to locate their prey. Shadow Dragon's ability to change color and shift between the tangible and intangible would be useless against an evil spirit, and its sharp claws wouldn't be able to harm it either. Our alpha, Amy, would be even less helpful. As he stepped into the manor from the outside, crossing just one doorway, the light in his field of vision immediately dimmed. Everything he saw seemed to have a gray tinge, radiating death and gloominess everywhere. The temperature also dropped suddenly, and a chilly wind blew through, bringing with it faint sobs. Such a dense concentration of negative energy particles. Sunan's brow furrowed slightly. For those who specialized in necromantic magic or had a way to counteract the negative energy particles' impact on their bodies, this manor was undoubtedly a paradise for cultivation. Meditating here would at least double their efficiency. Unfortunately, Sunan didn't have any way to counteract the side effects of negative energy particles, so he could only regretfully give up. But even if he did, the evil spirits here wouldn't let him meditate peacefully. After a brief pause, Sunan continued to step inside. All he could see within his line of sight were mandrakes in full bloom, their colors incredibly vibrant. After Sunan entered, these mandrakes began to sway slightly, their movements surprisingly synchronized, and even the opening of their flowers seemed to subtly face Sunan, sending chills down one spine. However, Sunan's expression remained unchanged as he ignored these mandrakes. He had seen more than enough sanity-draining species in the game in his previous life. Things like Whispering Orb, Deathstalker, Sathe Seed Parasite, countless disgusting monsters from all over the multiverse, and scenes that made one question the designer's sanity were countless. Compared to those scenes that made one doubt the designer's mental state, this was already quite normal. He crossed the empty courtyard and entered through the side door, passing through the corridor and arriving at the hall. Under the influence of the negative energy particles, the furniture here had begun to mold and decay. Mandrake vines had grown through these pieces of furniture, spreading outwards, almost covering the entire hall. Sunan took out a long sword from the magic cube and casually chopped down the vines blocking his path, ignoring the faint sobs that came from his ears. He searched several other places but still couldn't find it. All he saw along the way were mandrakes. Indeed, without a detection spell for undead, it's impossible to find the evil spirit's true form with just the naked eye. Sunan stopped, looking at the strange mist that had spread around him at some point. He had already activated the protective ring when he entered the manor. Protected by the force field, he didn't need to worry about being affected by the poisonous mist, but staying here for a long time, the force field would soon be eroded and dissipate. I need to act quickly. Sunan didn't hesitate. He flipped his wrist, and a ruby appeared in the palm of his hand. The next second, a surging wave of flames burst forth from him, spreading outward in all directions. Wherever the flames passed, the mandrakes and vines, like living things, fled frantically in all directions, but they were soon caught by the flames, twisting wildly and burning up, the fires spreading rapidly. In an instant, the entire manor seemed to boil like boiling oil splashed with water. The sobs all around suddenly increased in volume by several octaves. The mist around them rushed towards the burning mandrakes, as if trying to extinguish the flames, but the magical flames formed from high-density energy particles were different from ordinary flames, and this mist couldn't extinguish them. Sunan changed his location several times and threw out several more flame rune gems. Before long, the entire manor had become a sea of fire. As the mandrakes were burnt to charcoal in large numbers, the strange fragrance and mist in the air visibly dissipated. Ah! A piercing shriek suddenly rang out. A strange layer of energy seemed to appear in the void, and the rapid spread of the sea of fire suddenly stalled, then quickly weakened at an alarming rate, eventually disappearing. At the same time, a dark red mandrake suddenly appeared out of thin air on the empty ground 100 meters in front of Sunan. Its flower bloomed brightly, but the very center of the flower was a twisted human face. And beside the mandrake, there was a girl in a white dress stained with dark red blood, her hair disheveled and her face pale and contorted. She stared at Sunan with a vicious look, a cold and eerie smile on her face, the n/o/vel/b//and.c//om. Finally willing to show yourself? Sunan raised an eyebrow. Accompanied by a strange laugh, shadowy figures, like ghosts, appeared from all around, encircling Sunan. They retained the outline of human figures, their former appearances faintly discernible. Many of them were the servants and soldiers who had died in the manor. Among them were 5 particularly eerie armored warriors, the 5 great knights and knights who had died under Baron Silvermoon's command. These dead souls had been transformed into vengeful spirits by the blood mandrake. They paused for a moment, then, with shrill screams, they lunged at Sunan. Sunan had no intention of dodging. These vengeful spirits couldn't break through the protective force field around him. He spread out his palm, and a pure gem appeared out of thin air in his palm. The next second, he pointed his finger, and a ghostly figure suddenly staggered, involuntarily pulled by an invisible force, screaming as it was pulled into the gem. After a strange magical brilliance, the gem, a soul, is a vessel that contains soul energy. When solidified, it becomes a soul crystal. Many wizards believe soul energy is the most inclusive energy in the multiverse. Even elemental energy, some creatures can't absorb. But soul energy is different. Almost no creature exists that can't absorb and utilize soul energy. Soul energy is arguably the most versatile energy in the multiverse. A soul crystal is the product of a soul dissipating after death, a condensed form of soul energy. Sadly, soul crystals rarely form naturally. Only a few special beings drop pristine soul crystals. In most cases, wizards manufacture soul crystals artificially. To artificially manufacture a soul crystal, you need a vessel. Wizards mostly use various gems. What Sunan is currently doing is artificially manufacturing a soul crystal. Accompanied by a series of anguished screams, one by one, ghosts are pulled into the gem, gradually turning its color to gray. In just a short moment, the ghosts around Sunan vanished. Are there any more? Sunan looked at the evil spirit with anticipation. Just these ghosts weren't enough to completely transform the gem into a soul crystal. As if enraged by Sunan's gaze, the evil spirit screamed and unleashed a wave of negative energy. Unfortunately, it was blocked by the shield spell right in front of Sunan. Seeing this, the evil spirit flew towards Sunan. Just these ghosts? Sunan frowned in dissatisfaction. Then, without looking at the charging evil spirit, muttered a complex and difficult spell. He currently had 3 layers of protection: a shield spell, energy particles, and a protective ring. He also held a ground rune gem in his palm, ready to activate. He didn't need to worry about the evil spirit breaking through his defenses in a short time. As expected, when he was ready to cast a spell, the evil spirit's long, sharp-clawed hands couldn't even break through the shield. Magic missile. 3 fist-sized missiles shot out, penetrating the evil spirit's illusory form like bullets, causing it to let out a piercing scream, its body visibly dimming. Sunan's expression remained unchanged, calmly releasing the second magic missile. The fight between the two instantly became intense. The evil spirit completely abandoned defense. In fact, it couldn't defend, and kept changing directions around Sunan, aiming to break through the interception and tear his body apart. But it was always stopped by the shield. Sunan focused on casting magic missiles. By the time the evil spirit finally tore through the invisible shield, it had taken 4 magic missiles in a row. Its originally semi-transparent body became even more illusory, feeling like it would dissipate at any moment. By now, the evil spirit finally realized something was wrong and tried to escape. It was too late. Releasing the prepared fifth magic missile, Su Nan raised the gem in his hand. Having endured 3 more magic missiles, the evil spirit couldn't catch its breath before being pulled towards the gem by an invisible force. Despite its desperate struggles, it couldn't resist the gem's suction force, and its entire soul entered the gem. As its soul entered, the gem's color completely transformed, becoming a gray crystal. It's done! A look of joy appeared on Su Nan's face. Normally, he'd need at least dozens of night souls to create a low-level soul crystal. However, with his current spiritual power, he couldn't extract souls from corpses. He could only use certain magical items or formations. Unfortunately, he didn't have any NOVLB //JNN. The ghostly evil spirit was much easier. After beating it up and weakening its power, he could directly absorb it forcefully. One evil spirit was worth 20 or 30 night souls. Putting away the crystal, Su Nan looked up at the blood-red mandala not far away. The evil spirit was essentially the blood-red mandala's physical manifestation, containing almost all its power, a free-moving extension. Therefore, with the evil spirit's demise, the blood-red mandala also suffered a severe blow and visibly weakened. Even its size shrunk, becoming less than 8 inches tall. When pulled out of the ground by Su Nan, the blood-red mandala emitted a sharp, piercing cry, struggling violently to burrow back into the ground. However, its weakness ultimately couldn't resist Su Nan's strength, and it was forced into a silver-plated box. The box's surface was engraved with a sealing spell formation, suppressing the blood-red mandala's spiritual power from spreading. As long as the box wasn't opened, the blood-red mandala couldn't wreak havoc. After finishing all this, Su Nan clapped his hands and looked around. With the resident evil spirit destroyed and the blood-red mandala sealed, the mandalas in the manor began to wither and die in large numbers. Soon, the environment returned to normal. Apart from some dilapidation, nothing seemed unusual. However, in reality, negative energy particles remained in the air, making it temporarily uninhabitable. If they dissipate naturally, it would take 4 to 5 months to recover to a normal level. Of course, if a wizard apprentice was hired to purify it, it could be restored to normal within a few days. But Su Nan wasn't willing to do unpaid work. To be honest, 1,000 gold coins to eliminate an evil spirit was already cheap. If not for the blood-red mandala and the soul crystal, he wouldn't have taken this job. Outside the manor, Viscount Silvermoon paced back and forth, occasionally looking up at the manor, his anxiety evident. Not long after Su Nan entered the manor, flames erupted inside, followed by a series of screams, making him shudder. He wanted to bring people in to investigate, but he didn't dare take the risk. He was so anxious that sweat started to bead on his forehead. Fortunately, Su Nan came out of the manor after a while. Lord Anger, Viscount Silvermoon rushed over, wanting to say something, but stopping himself. Su Nan said calmly, "The evil spirit has been eliminated." Upon hearing this, Viscount Silvermoon let out a sigh of relief. There are still some negative energy particles left in the manor. Don't move in for 6 months. Su Nan reminded him again. Viscount Silvermoon nodded quickly in understanding. In fact, even without Su Nan's words, he wouldn't dare assign this manor again. After such a bizarre incident, the manor would probably be abandoned and sealed. However, it didn't matter. As long as Shizhong City was unaffected, he wouldn't feel too heartbroken about a mere manor. This time, we owe it all to Lord Anger. I've already arranged a banquet. Please grace us with your presence. Viscount Silvermoon's tone was very enthusiastic. He finally met a powerful wizard, and he certainly wouldn't let him leave just like that. If he could recruit him to his territory, even if he gave him a whole town, he would be delighted. But to Viscount Silvermoon's disappointment, Su Nan refused without hesitation. "No need. I have something to do." Without waiting for Viscount Silvermoon's response, Su Nan turned and left. At this time, A guard ran from a distance, passing him by. Although Su Nin wasn't far away, his keen hearing allowed him to clearly hear the guard's whispered report to Viscount Silvermoon. "My lord, Baron Shining Light has declared war on Blackstone City." The beginning of Winter Music Month. Not long after the new year, Shining Light City, accusing Blackstone City's Lord K. Arnest of colluding with the Starfire sect, demanded that he appear in Shining Light City alone to plead guilty and receive punishment. After K. Arnest refused, they brazenly launched an attack on Blackstone City. Clack! Clack! The sound of metal armor plates rubbing against each other echoed. K led his men onto the city wall, taking the brass telescope from Bread and gazing into the distance. Under the night sky, the entire plain outside the city was dotted with bonfires. Silhouettes danced around the fires, and dense tents formed a continuous stretch, extending far into the plains. Owen has brought out his entire force this time, not just his own army, but also the armies of those three traitors, Devon, Zolf, and Norwood. On top of that, they've recruited over 1,000 mercenaries. Bread, looking at the army in the distance, had a somewhat heavy expression. Owen's faction alone had nearly 4,000 soldiers, and with the addition of mercenaries, their army size had exceeded 5,000, almost 4 times that of Blackstone City. This war wouldn't be easy. Mercenaries are nothing to worry about. These guys are undisciplined, just a bunch of rabble. They might be useful in a frontal battle on the flatlands, but they'll be a drag in a siege. Kay put down the brass telescope, speaking calmly, but his brows were slightly furrowed, clearly not as composed as he claimed. Although he had known that after the assassination attempt failed, Owen would likely tear down all pretense and directly attack Blackstone City, Kay still felt a heavy pressure when it actually happened. Especially seeing the densely packed army outside the city walls made the burden on his shoulders even heavier. Blackstone City had been expanding its military equipment all this time, but even now, they only had a barely maintained army of around 1,300. Of those, 300 were militia who had only received basic training and hadn't seen blood yet. It was questionable how much combat effectiveness they would have on the battlefield. Of the remaining 1,800 were city guards with decent fighting skills. The remaining 200 belonged to the Blackrock Cavalry. This was Kay's true trump card. It's a pity we had so little time. If I had another year or two, I could have turned the Blackrock Cavalry into a true full-night army. Even if there were only 200 or 300, conquering the entire Shining Light territory would be a breeze. Kay sighed inwardly. Training a Blackrock Cavalry cost about 50 gold coins. Even with the Blackstone mine, a cash cow, the Blackrock Cavalry's expansion had always been slow. They were only 200 strong so far. Have all the people from the Blackstone mine area been evacuated? Kay turned to ask. Jordan nodded. They've all been safely evacuated. According to the scout reports, the enemy has already occupied the area. Kay nodded slightly, gazing at the army in the distance and pondering his next strategy. For them, defense was more advantageous. Owen's elite cavalry was more suited for fighting on flat terrain, and their combat effectiveness would be at least halved in a siege. After all, horses couldn't climb city walls to fight. But the Blackrock Cavalry was different. The Blackrock beasts were perfectly capable of defending the city. In fact, these fearless puppet creatures could unleash even greater combat power in a siege. The scales tipped in Blackstone City's favor. But simply defending wasn't an option. If the war dragged on for too long, supplies would become a fatal weakness. Besides, the Blackstone mine area was still in enemy hands, and Kay didn't want it to become a cash cow for the enemy. The best plan was to defend for a while, wearing down the enemy's forces. Once the enemy became complacent, they would send the Blackrock Cavalry to directly assault the enemy camp's core. If they could directly eliminate the enemy's command, the war would be theirs to win. The Blackrock Cavalry, since its formation, had been shrouded in secrecy. No outsider knew how powerful this force truly was. The rebels were unprepared, and the plan had a high chance of success. Thoughts raced through his mind, and Kay quickly made up his mind. Turning back, seeing his officers all with solemn expressions, Kay calmly said, "The enemy is coming in force, but we're not pushovers. We've been building up our strength for 2 years just for this day. Now, let those rebels experience our power. Yes, Lord. Let those rebels see how formidable Blackstone City truly is. I can't wait. Inspired by Kay, the officer's fighting spirit quickly surged. Brett and Jordan exchanged glances, both simultaneously showing smiles. Outsiders might be clueless, but they, as members of Blackstone City, knew just how dramatic the city's transformation had been over the past 2 years. In terms of knights alone, Blackstone City already had over 160. Many barren territories didn't even have that many knights. Not to mention that Blackstone City also had 200 Blackrock beasts with knight-level combat power. In total, Blackstone City had over 300 knight-level combat power. To be honest, if Blackstone City hadn't been limited to one city, and its basic military strength was so weak, with nothing else to show for besides the Blackrock cavalry, a mere Owen wouldn't be a match for them. And it all had to thank Lord Su-Nan. I wonder where Lord Su-Nan is now. Jordan patted the long sword at his waist, grinning. If Lord Su-Nan were here, we wouldn't even need to defend. We'd just charge out and crush those bastards. N/O/vel/B//in.C//om. The surrounding knights all nodded in agreement. Even the usually steady Bread was no exception. If it were anyone else, even a peak great knight, they wouldn't believe that a single person could sway the outcome of a war involving 5,000 or 6,000 troops. But Su-Nan was different. They had witnessed the incredible and unpredictable power of wizards, and thus had immense confidence. If it were him, he might truly create a jaw-dropping miracle. Without lingering too long, Kay observed for a while from the city wall and then turned to leave. Preparations for war were incredibly tedious, and he had many things to arrange. The next day, not long after dawn, a low, mournful horn echoed from outside the city. Kay, accompanied by his officers, ascended the city wall. As they looked out, they saw the enemy's densely packed army beginning to form formations and ranks. Soon, thousands of soldiers, pushing siege weaponry, began to advance slowly towards the city wall. They're so eager. A cold glint flashed in Kay's eyes. He raised his hand and commanded in a deep voice, "Prepare to meet the enemy." "Yes, Lord." The officers responded in unison, then turned and loudly instructed their soldiers to prepare for battle. The defending army sprang into action. "Kill!" The deafening shouts of battle and cries of agony echoed across the city walls. Countless siege ladders were erected before the city walls, and a massive throng of mercenaries and soldiers swarmed upwards. From afar, the city walls appeared to be crawling with countless ants. In the Starlight Continent, where knights roamed freely, the defensive role of towering city walls was not very significant. Even a probationary knight could climb the walls, braving the arrows and falling rocks. As for knights, a mere tens of meters of height was just a few leaps for them. Therefore, city walls often became a crucial point of fierce contention between both sides. Within half an hour of the war's eruption, the city wall had already become a blood-soaked battlefield like a meat grinder. Blood seeped out along the crevices of the stone bricks, quickly staining the ground. Behind the battlefield, in the heart of the heavily guarded army, for knights clad in armor coldly watched the blood-splattered city walls. "The resistance from Blackstone City is unexpectedly strong," said Davin, his brow furrowed. "It's normal," said Zolf, his tall figure booming. "Ultimately, expanding the army is all about money. Kay holds the treasure of the Blackstone mine area, so if his military strength hasn't improved at all, then he's truly useless." Norwood chuckled. "Don't worry. Our forces are several times larger than Blackstone City's. There's no way we could possibly lose." He then turned towards the man beside him with a flattering smile. "Moreover, we have Lord Martell, and with you leading the charge, defeating Blackstone City is simply a matter of time." The man named Martell was about 40 years old, his features sharp and his demeanor vigorous. He was one of the several new barons granted land after Owen took over Shining Light territory, and he was also one of Owen's confidants. Martell was also a high-ranking great knight. This time, he had been ordered by Owen to lead the army on this expedition, and he was determined to make a name for himself in order to gain even more land. Hearing Norwood's words, a hint of pride flashed across Martell's face. He laughed. Lord Norwood is right. With a several-fold difference in troops, I can't think of any reason why we would lose. Davin, being more seasoned and cautious, couldn't help but remind them, don't forget there's a wizard in Blackstone City. Lord Davin is referring to Sunan, isn't he? Norwood scoffed. That kid grew up before our eyes, timid and cowardly, and his body was so weak that he couldn't even cultivate a breathing method. How could such a waste be a wizard? Besides, the rumors of a wizard being here are uncertain at best. Martell also seemed unconcerned. Even if there was a real wizard, he, a high-ranking great knight, wouldn't be afraid. Davin actually had doubts about the rumor too. Seeing that the two were unconcerned, he didn't say anything more and continued to look at the battle in the distance. The first to assault the city were the mercenaries and the armies brought by the three barons. Their combat abilities were not exceptional. Therefore, even now, their forces hadn't captured the city wall, and the intense stalemate continued. The offensive was even beginning to show signs of fatigue due to the prolonged siege. Seeing this, Martell finally couldn't hold back and led the elite troops from Shining Light territory into the attack. As Martell's army joined the fray, the pressure on the defenders increased. Within moments, the area of the city wall occupied by the attacking forces had advanced another step. Martell, with an unstoppable and valiant posture, plowed through the defenders, creating a bloody path and making the defensive line teeter on the verge of collapse. Gazing from afar with bronze binoculars, the three of them simultaneously showed signs of joy. As expected of Lord Martell, he's truly formidable. This is the power of a high-ranking great knight. But just as the three were rejoicing, the situation on the city wall suddenly changed. A group of panther-like creatures suddenly surged onto the city wall, ferociously attacking the assaulting army. These ferocious beasts were unexpectedly formidable, even able to fight on par with the knights. For a moment, the attacking army's offensive momentum stalled. At the same time, Kay, accompanied by a black panther, appeared on the city wall, intercepting Martell. Although Kay was merely a junior great knight, far inferior to Martell in strength, he had the advantage of having a fearless great knight-level Blackrock beast by his side. The two, man and beast, worked together in perfect harmony, rendering Martell helpless for a time. What are those things? Norwood was shocked. Davin and Zolf also showed expressions of astonishment. After recovering, Davin hesitantly said, "Those seem to be the mounts of the Blackrock Cavalry Regiment." Mounts? Zolf and Norwood looked at each other in bewilderment. They knew Blackstone City had formed a cavalry regiment, and their mounts were said to be a peculiar species of panther-like beasts. At the time, they had scoffed at the idea and hadn't taken it seriously. Although many beast combat abilities were superior to warhorses, superior did not necessarily mean they were suitable for the battlefield. For cavalry, the mounts were more importantly their level of domestication, their ability to obey their master's commands. Only then could they achieve a synergistic effect of 1+1 being greater than 2.nov. L. B/JNN. However, beast species that could be domesticated on a large scale and adapted to the battlefield were extremely rare. Davin, Zolf, and Norwood had just thought Blackstone City was trying to draw attention. But when they actually saw them, they were shocked to find that those Black Panthers moved with measured steps, worked together seamlessly, and were fearless, even more elite than the most seasoned soldiers. They were perfectly suited for the battlefield. If all the mounts of the Blackrock Cavalry Regiment were these creatures, then the combat power of this force would be truly terrifying. With the addition of 200 Blackrock Panthers to the fray, the area that the attacking forces had initially captured was quickly reclaimed. The battle immediately fell into a stalemate once again. Damn it, Blackstone City actually has such a hidden ace up their sleeve. Norwood showed his annoyance. Zolf frowned. This is trouble. With those beasts, capturing Blackstone City might not be so easy. Davin also furrowed his brow. This unexpected variable meant that even if they could finally capture Blackstone City, they would likely be severely weakened. The siege casualties are too high. It's better to lay siege. After pondering for a while, Davin turned to the other two. Winter has just passed. Blackstone City surely doesn't have much food stored. If we lay siege for a month or two, they will definitely be unable to hold out. At that point, they'll have to come out to fight us. Zolf and Norwood's eyes lit up, and they nodded in agreement. Good idea. Let's propose this to Lord Martell when he gets back. The main force for a decisive battle outside the city was Baron Owen's elite cavalry regiment. This way, their army's casualties would be reduced. Just as the three were feeling smug about their brilliant idea, they suddenly heard a piercing scream. They turned their heads to follow the sound, and were astonished to see that in the right wing of the army, where the elite cavalry regiment was located, something was amiss. Hundreds of war horses were running wild, their neighing incessant. Many cavalrymen were thrown off their horses and immediately trampled to death by the surging hooves. Other cavalrymen, while trying to calm their steeds, were flung out as if struck by a charging elephant, falling over 10 meters away, howling in agony. Some unfortunate souls even had their bodies twisted into grotesque shapes in midair and landed without a single groan, their lives extinguished. What happened? Davin was both surprised and furious, summoning his adjutant to question him. However, the adjutant was also bewildered to n/o/vel/b//and.c//om. Sir, I don't know either. The soldiers suddenly flew off. Useless. Davin's face darkened, not bothering to continue berating his adjutant. He turned his horse and wanted to go see for himself. But the next moment he stopped, because the chaos in the distance was spreading towards them. Getting closer, Davin could finally see a clue. It was as if an invisible giant beast was charging towards them in the crowd, knocking away any soldiers who stood in its path, breaking their bones and tendons. Looking down from the sky, it was clear that the originally dense crowd was plowed apart, leaving a shockingly bloody trail in its wake, continuing to spread towards Davin and the other two. The three of them immediately changed color. Stop it! Davin almost roared out the order. However, facing an invisible enemy, the soldiers had no way to intercept it. They could only use their flesh and blood to stand in the way, but the next second they were knocked away, and some even directly split into several pieces, blood splattering everywhere. Such a bloody scene made the fear on the faces of the surrounding soldiers even more intense. After dozens of soldiers died inexplicably, the rest finally broke down, screaming in terror and fleeing in all directions. Those who flee will die. Davin cut down a soldier who was fleeing like a headless fly, shouting fiercely. Unfortunately, this tactic had no effect on the soldiers who were blinded by fear. Only a few knights stubbornly stayed in front of the three lords. They were all knights who had villages assigned to them. Once they deserted in battle, they would inevitably be liquidated afterwards, stripped of their village territories. Damn it, what kind of monster is that? Norwood's expression was filled with undisguised fear. That is my magical companion. A voice suddenly came from behind. Everyone suddenly turned around, only to realize that there was a person behind them they didn't know when he appeared. After recognizing the person's face, Norwood's pupils constricted. He exclaimed in disbelief, "Sunan!" In his mind, Sunan should still be in Blackstone City. How could he have crossed the battlefield and appeared in the center of their own army? How did he do it? Davin and Zolf were also surprised, but they exchanged glances and quickly made a decision. With a clang, they drew their weapons. Kill him! The surrounding knights rushed forward, full of murderous intent, charging towards Sunan. Compared to the terrifying invisible monster, it was obviously easier to deal with an enemy they could see. However, they quickly discovered that this idea was wrong. A dazzling burst of lightning erupted in their field of vision. The blinding light made the knights subconsciously close their eyes. In this closure, they could no longer open them again. Intense pain immediately swept through their bodies. Darkness swallowed their consciousness. Davin and the other three only saw Su Nan wave his hand. Countless bolts of lightning erupted violently, writhing like long snakes through the void, shooting in all directions. In just an instant, more than 10 knights were turned to charcoal and died on the spot. The three of them stared blankly at this scene, their minds blank, their mouths agape, speechless. What kind of power is this? More than 10 knights, including several high-level knights, were killed in an instant. The three of them were pale, their eyes looking at Su Nan filled with uncontrollable shock and fear. It was at this moment that they finally realized that the rumors about Su Nan were true. Whether it was the legendary powerful means of the wizards, or that Su Nan had become a wizard, the truth of these rumors was proved extremely powerfully at this moment. Seeing Su Nan looking at them indifferently, Zolf suddenly came to his senses. He was the first to react, shouting urgently, "Wait, I surrender. As long as you don't kill me, I can have my family pay a huge ransom." Zolf spoke quickly, afraid that if he spoke too slowly, Su Nan would act. Davin and Norwood quickly reacted as well, saying the same thing. Not to mention the unfathomable Su Nan, the invisible beast alone was a terrifying weapon of war that made people's hair stand on end when it was on the battlefield. Even the most elite army would collapse in the face of such a monster. They even doubted whether Mattel could handle both Su Nan and the beast. In any case, the most important thing now was to save their own lives. Surrender? Su Nan smiled coldly, nodded and said, "Okay, surrender and kill half." Davin and the other three were delighted to hear the first half of the sentence, but they were immediately stunned. What does kill half mean? Before they could figure it out, they saw Su Nan casually raise his hand. Countless wind blades appeared out of thin air, like a barrage of arrows, sweeping over, tearing their lower bodies into bloody mist. Only after their upper bodies fell to the ground did they realize what was happening, letting out heart-rending screams. The powerful physique of knights allowed the three of them to scream for 4 or 5 minutes, even with only half their bodies left, before gradually quieting down, dying with a full heart of fear and despair. Su Nan withdrew his gaze and looked around. Under the repeated attacks of the stealthy dragon, the enemy either died, was injured, or had escaped. Seeing this, Su Nan directly ordered the stealthy dragon to charge towards the enemy army that was attacking the city. The attacking army had no idea that there would be an enemy attacking from behind. They were caught off guard. The key was that the soldiers attacking the city didn't even know where the attack was coming from. They only saw their companions' bodies twisting and breaking, limbs and bodies flying everywhere. They were scared pale and looked bewildered. Mattel also realized something was wrong at this time. What are those three guys up to? Why did they let the enemy go? But when he looked back to see, all he saw was a chaotic camp and corpses everywhere. What's going on? Where's the standing army? How did they all disappear in the blink of an eye? Mattel was full of disbelief. On the other hand, Kai, Beret-eyed Bread, and Xiaodun, when they saw the scene below, they immediately thought of the invisible beast that Su Nan had raised, and they all showed a look of joy. "It's Sir Su Nan! Sir Su Nan is back!" The name Su Nan seemed to have some kind of magic. As soon as the name came out, the morale of the defending knights soared, and their attack became much more fierce. Su Nan? That wizard! Mattel's face changed, and he vaguely realized that he and his men had probably misjudged a very important piece of intelligence. Unfortunately, it was too late to realize this now. Mattel was a decisive person after all. He knew he was in a difficult position and didn't hesitate at all, decisively retreated backwards, jumped off the city wall, and planned to escape. However, the moment he landed, he felt a tightening in his ankle. He looked down and was surprised to find that a patch of blood-red vines had appeared at his feet, spreading upwards along his ankle. Mattel immediately swung his sword to cut, but the blood-red vines were unexpectedly tough. He used all his strength in one strike, and could only cut off one. Moreover, he could clearly feel that his stamina was being drained and absorbed by these strange vines. Not far away, Su Nan slightly raised his hand. The blood vine ring on his index finger flashed slightly. He smiled coldly. The brilliance flashed in front of his palm, and 3 magic missiles whizzed out. Mattel, whose actions were restricted by the blood vines, couldn't dodge at all. He could only watch helplessly as the 3 magic missiles flew towards him, piercing his armor, causing his mana shield to fluctuate violently. The violent impact made Mattel turn pale. Before he could catch his breath, 3 more magic missiles flew towards him. Under the fear of death, Mattel roared loudly. Powerful mana burst out suddenly, tearing the blood vines on his body into pieces with a tearing sound, then turned and fled towards the distance without looking back. But after only running 10 meters, he suddenly felt a chill run up his spine, instinctively raising his long sword to cut towards the oblique rear. Clang! The crisp sound of metal clashing suddenly exploded. The long sword seemed to hit something, and a spark appeared out of thin air. Vaguely, Mattel seemed to see the silhouette of a giant beast with 4 limbs on the ground and sharp teeth and claws. Before he could figure it out, the giant beast suddenly twisted its body, and its thick tail cracked through the air and whipped towards him. Boom! Mattel flew backwards like a kite with a broken string, spewing a mouthful of blood in midair, and fell heavily to the ground with a thud. Whoosh! 3 magic missiles followed closely behind, and Mattel's head instantly exploded like a watermelon. Looking at the headless corpse lying on the ground from a distance, Su Nan slowly retracted his palm. High-level Great Knights were indeed a bit troublesome. Without using rune gems, he still had to cooperate with the stealthy dragon to kill them. Mattel's death was like the final straw that broke the camel's back. The soldiers attacking the city could no longer hold on and began to flee. Beret-Eye Bread and Xiao Dun and other generals immediately opened the city gate, leading the men to chase after the fleeing soldiers. Ku-Yi strode toward Su Nan, gave him a warm hug with a hearty laugh. "Welcome home." The war ended in a way nobody expected, thanks to Su Nan's intervention. The enemy suffered over 1,300 casualties, with another 600 or 700 captured. Many others fled, their whereabouts unknown. Blackstone City's losses were relatively small, with less than 200 soldiers killed. However, over 20 Blackrock beasts were destroyed, leaving Bread heartbroken. Despite the losses, most were overjoyed. After all, defeating the rebels with such minimal casualties was a remarkable feat. The entire Blackstone City was buzzing with joy after the victory. That evening, Kay hosted a celebratory feast in the inner castle's banquet hall. Knights gathered, drinking and sharing stories. Even some of the injured knights, their limbs wrapped in bandages, joined in the revelry. After a round of drinks with the commanders in the front hall, Kay found Su Nan resting in the council chamber. But instead of resting, Su Nan was petting a cat. "When did you get a cat?" NOVLB /JNN. Kay looked at the white cat perched on Su Nan's lap, surprised. "This is Amy, my friend." Su Nan smiled slightly, then introduced Amy to Kay. "This is my brother Kay." Seeing Su Nan introduce himself to a cat with a straight face, Kay found it amusing. But a moment later, his eyes widened in shock. "Meow, hello there." The cat raised its paw and greeted Kay. "A talking cat?" Kay gaped slightly. Despite witnessing numerous things beyond his comprehension from Su Nan, this moment still felt like a shock to his worldview. This world was even more fantastical than he imagined. "Hello." Kay awkwardly greeted Amy. He sat down opposite Su Nan, took a sip of wine to gather his thoughts, and spoke slowly. "I think now is the perfect time to reclaim Shining Light territory." Su Nan seemed to have anticipated Kay's words, showing no surprise. He smiled and nodded. "When do you plan to launch the attack?" "In 3 days," Kay said with a serious expression. "We can't give Owen time to reorganize his forces. It will be much harder to take Shining Light City if he does. The tables have turned. Even without the retreating soldiers, our forces wouldn't easily take Shining Light City." "That's true." Kay glanced at Su Nan, a knowing smile on his face. "But you're here, aren't you?" Su Nan smiled and nodded, saying nothing. He understood Kay's meaning. Indeed, he had over 10 ways to break through the city gates of Shining Light City. And once the siege turned into a street battle, Blackstone City would have a significant advantage. with the elite cavalry regiment decimated and the army severely weakened. Losing the fortified walls of Shining Light City would leave Owen with no means to fight back against Blackstone City. How are the potion sales going? Sunan suddenly remembered that he had left a batch of potions for Kay to deliver to the Firefox Trading Company before going to Stonebell City. He wondered how well they had been received. Upon mentioning this, a delighted smile spread across Kay's face. They're selling very well. The potions are highly sought after. They sold out within 3 days. Mujwa also brought news that many lords in the Thornflower Duchy are interested in ordering more potions. I've already received over 500 pre-orders. Mujwa said it's up to you. If you want to accept the orders, he can collect a portion of the deposit from the lords in advance. Of course, I'll accept them, Sunan said without hesitation. Once he reclaimed Shining Light territory, he would start constructing a base. He needed his own magical plant garden, a workshop for magical items, a potion room, a large laboratory, and a puppet factory, among other things. At least 2,000 to 3,000 gold coins were needed for the initial investment. He couldn't just rely on taxing his territory, so he needed to find ways to make money. Selling potions would significantly relieve his financial pressure. The Firefox Trading Company also sent some things. I've had them sent to your yard's warehouse. Take a look when you have time. I will. Sunan left the council chamber. Back in his courtyard, Amy jumped out of Sunan's arms, leaping into the air and disappearing. She went to play with Yinlong. Sunan headed to the warehouse and quickly found several boxes stacked in the corner. 2 of them were filled to the brim with books. The books had obviously been carefully cleaned, but both the covers and the paper color held a sense of agedness. Sunan picked up and browsed through the books one by one. As expected, over 90% were knowledge-based, many of which overlapped with the ones he already had. There were only 4 spell model books. One was the Zero Ring spell, Transmission spell. Another was the Second Ring spell, Meruov's Strong Acid Arrow. Among the items left by Amy's owner, there was also a Second Ring spell model book, Shattering Sound Wave. Both of these spells were quite practical offensive spells among Second Ring spells. The remaining 2 books were a pleasant surprise for Sunan. They were both First Ring spell model books, namely Silent Illusion and Level 1 Summon Monster Technique. The former was considered a must-learn spell for wizards. The effect was to instantly create an illusion of a single object or creature within a certain range, which could move freely, achieving the purpose of confusing the enemy. Mastering this spell would undoubtedly enhance combat flexibility. While the Level 1 Summon Monster Technique had a certain degree of uncertainty, it could still play a significant role at certain times if one was lucky enough. Moreover, the high uncertainty could be compensated for by frequency. As long as one prepared in advance, the chances of success would increase. In short, both spells were very useful. Including these 2, I have 9 First Ring spells that I haven't mastered yet. It will take at least a year to master them all. Sunan sighed inwardly. That said, he wished he could have more spells. For a wizard, the more spells one mastered, the better equipped they were to handle various unexpected situations. Besides spells, Sunan also found several books of interest among the knowledge-based books. One was titled Puppet and Magic Puppet. Magic puppets could be considered a branch of puppets, one that had been researched and developed most extensively by wizards since their inception. Initially, magic puppets were created as servants and assistants with simple intelligence. Later, some wizards experimented with incorporating rune secrets to imbue the puppets with specific skills and abilities, making them more intelligent and powerful. This greatly enhanced their combat capabilities. They started to be widely used on battlefields, and even famous magic puppet legions emerged. As more and more wizards devoted themselves to research and development of magic puppets, their types gradually increased, and their power significantly enhanced. Magic puppets can be broadly categorized based on their material composition. Flesh puppets, clay puppets, stone puppets, metal puppets, and supreme puppets, among others. Flesh puppets are unique, their power determined by the quality of the flesh used in their construction, resulting in a wide range of capabilities .n/o/vel/b// and .c//om. At the lower end, flesh puppets crafted from the flesh of ferocious beasts are only slightly stronger than novice knights. At the upper end, god-body puppets constructed from the flesh of deities are so powerful that even true spirit wizards would retreat in fear. Clay puppets are mainly used as laborers, not known for their combat prowess, capable of only bullying probationary knights. Stone puppets are somewhat better, but only reach the combat level of a formal knight. Metal puppets, on the other hand, exhibit a far wider variety. Steel puppets, mithril puppets, shadow steel puppets, diamond puppets, and many more. Generally, the more precious the material, the more powerful the resulting puppet. Even the lowest-ranking steel puppet possesses the combat strength of a legendary knight. Shadow steel puppets and diamond puppets, in particular, are capable of engaging a formal wizard in battle. Of course, the cost of producing such puppets is astronomical. Sunan doesn't know if the Starlight Continent even has the materials required to create shadow steel and diamond puppets anymore. As for supreme puppets, they represent the primordial form of magic energy constructs. Building upon this primal form, wizards have developed legendary constructs like arcane guardians, magic energy mechas, tower spirit constructs, and silver sage, among others. These legendary constructs are typically used to combat deities. Besides these puppets, there are also specialized models such as the dark puppet, the strangulation puppet, the bone puppet, etc. However, due to their specific functions, they are generally only created by wizards with specific needs. In summary, magic puppets vary greatly in combat strength depending on their type. Many wizards craft puppets to serve as laborers or guards. Sunan has also considered this. But to create a puppet, a soul core is essential. The soul core grants the puppet basic intelligence, allowing it to perform relatively uncomplicated repetitive tasks. Clay and stone puppets are less demanding, requiring only a gem as a soul core. However, higher-level metal puppets require soul crystals. According to their quality and quantity, soul crystals are classified into 5 levels: micro, small, medium, large, and legendary. Typically, the higher the quality of the soul crystal used, the more intelligent the resulting puppet. The soul crystal Nan obtained from Kubero Manor was merely a micro soul crystal, the lowest grade. It was sufficient for crafting steel puppets, but higher-level puppets were beyond his reach. However, Sunan was already quite content with having a steel puppet at this stage. Once the magic energy crystal forging furnace is built, I will begin making puppets. The second book that caught Sunan's interest dealt with the artificial creation of secondary magic stones. Secondary magic stones are artificially produced energy crystal bodies containing relatively less energy compared to real magic stones. While they may not match the versatility and functionality of true magic stones, they can serve as substitutes in many situations, hence their name, secondary magic stones. During the wizard's golden age 1,000 years ago, secondary magic stones weren't widely used. However, with the drastic decline in energy particle density, all the magic stone veins on the Starlight Continent have now depleted, leaving no naturally occurring magic stones. The importance of secondary magic stones has thus become apparent. One could even say that secondary magic stones are the only choice for wizard apprentices when selecting energy crystal bodies in the current era. This is great. With magic cubes, I should be able to synthesize real magic stones. Sunan's eyes lit up. With magic stones, building the magic energy crystal forging furnace and establishing energy particle aggregation formations in the magical plant garden would be much easier in the future. Putting the organized books aside, Sunan turned his attention to the last chest. Inside were several seemingly ancient items. However, upon inspection, Sunan realized most were antiques, holding no value for him. Only 2 objects, with faint traces of patterns on their surface, suggested they were once magical items. But due to the ravages of time, these 2 items were now completely destroyed. Magical items from 1,000 years ago are essentially unusable now. Obtaining the protective ring and magic coin before was lucky. Looks like I have to rely on myself and create magical items. Sunan cleared away the useless items, instructing the servants to dispose of them, then headed for the laboratory. He had used a considerable number of rune gems during his trip. Considering that he would be attacking Shining Light City soon, he needed to make more rune gems for self-defense. The 2,000 gold coins he obtained from the Starfire Sect stronghold were all exchanged for various gemstones, and he planned to use half for making rune gems. Owen, the Baron, attacking Blackstone City attracted the attention of many nobles. When Owen, after his elder brother's death in battle, shamelessly seized the title and exiled his two nephews to Blackstone City, it caused a stir in the Golden Rock province. Many speculated that once Owen consolidated the Shining Light territory and firmly established his position, he would take action to eliminate them. As expected, this is precisely how things unfolded. Almost immediately after winter passed, Owen, the Baron, couldn't wait to launch his attack. He used the fabricated excuse of Blackstone City colluding with the Starfire Sect, a lie that anyone with half a brain could see through. Many nobles disapproved of Owen's shameless behavior and felt sympathy for the K brothers. But no one believed that Blackstone City could defeat Owen, the Baron. After all, the disparity in their strength was clear as day. However, the final outcome astonished everyone who followed the situation. Owen, the Baron, was defeated, and it was a crushing defeat. His 5,000 troops were routed, and only about half returned. The elite cavalry regiment was wiped out. The leading Great Knight, Martel, and 3 barons died in battle. Even calling it a heavy loss would be an understatement. After this battle, the balance of power between Owen, the Baron, and Blackstone City completely reversed. All of a sudden, the nobles of the Golden Rock province had a new understanding of Blackstone City's strength. Sunan's name also officially entered the sight of many nobles. According to the returning remnants of the army, the 3 barons and Martel, the Great Knight, were all slain by Sunan. The latter could unleash lightning, wind blades, and summon blood-red vines, exhibiting incredible skills. He also possessed a giant beast capable of invisibility. It was the sudden attack of this beast that caused the army to crumble, ultimately leading to their defeat. One could say that Shining Light City's defeat was largely due to Sunan. He, single-handedly, changed the course of the war. Upon hearing this intelligence, the nobles were all dumbfounded. Even a great knight wouldn't be capable of such a feat. Unless a legendary knight intervened, there might be a chance. At the age of barely 20, achieving what even a legendary knight might not be able to accomplish was truly a miracle. It was from this event that the nobles of the Golden Rock province learned that the legends about wizards were actually true. For a while, except for the handful of nobles at the top of the pyramid who were already aware of the wizard's secret, everyone else began gathering information about wizards. And on the 4th day after the end of the war, an even more shocking piece of news spread, causing a stir in the Golden Rock province. Blackstone City officially launched an attack, aiming straight for Shining Light City. Crack! The sound of porcelain shattering echoed through the council chamber. Owen clutched the broken cup, ignoring the shards that pierced his skin. Blood flowed freely, and his bloodshot eyes stared fixedly at the middle-aged man seated opposite him. His voice was hoarse as he spoke. Did the Marquis really say that? The middle-aged man was impeccably dressed, with a neatly trimmed mustache, exuding the air of a pampered nobleman. Hearing Owen's words, he raised his red tea and took a sip before speaking slowly. The Marquis is currently busy dealing with matters in Storm territory and has no time to pay attention to your affairs. Besides, the Marquis has already provided you with considerable assistance, even connecting you with assassins from the Starfire Sect. He has done more than enough. How have you repaid his kindness? You're being forced into this predicament by 2 young upstarts. Do you know how many nobles are laughing at you right now? The middle-aged man spoke in a measured tone, his words devoid of any compassion. Owen's temples throbbed with anger, but he dared not unleash his fury in front of this man. He could only clench his teeth and endure. To be honest, he couldn't comprehend how the situation had deteriorated to this point. In just under 2 years, how had those 2 brothers managed to expand Blackstone City to its current scale? And that Sunan, who was an utter waste 2 years ago, unable to even grasp the basics of the breathing technique. How had he suddenly become a wizard, even killing Martel? Incomprehensible. Owen truly couldn't grasp it. Perhaps he shouldn't have cared about Face and simply eliminated those brothers from the start. But regretting it now was too late. Unless the Golden Rock Marquis was willing to send troops, with his remaining forces, the possibility of defending Shining Light City was slim. And even if they managed to hold on, his title as Baron of Shining Light would likely be a mere formality. Thinking this, Owen took a deep breath, suppressing his anger, and said, "Envoy Gelée, if the Marquis is displeased with me, he can punish me later, and I will have no complaints. But if Shining Light territory falls into other hands, it will be much harder for the Marquis to control this land afterward." Would the Marquis willingly abandon Shining Light territory? Gelée glanced at Owen, a smirk playing on his lips. "Don't worry about that. Even if Shining Light territory falls into other hands, his lordship will personally reclaim it later." Owen was taken aback. What did that mean? Did the Golden Rock Marquis finally intend to break the unwritten rules among nobles and directly seize the territory of others? But if he truly did that, the nobles of the entire duchy wouldn't allow it. They would surely rise up against the Golden Rock Marquis. Even the Golden Rock Marquis couldn't bear the consequences of such actions. Or was the Golden Rock Marquis using some method to ensure the other nobles turned a blind eye to this? "What do you mean, envoy?" Owen asked, his voice laced with uncertainty. "Don't worry about that." Gelée waved his hand, his eyes narrowing. "Though you have failed in your duties, his lordship is magnanimous. In recognition of your past service, he has instructed me to take you out of Shining Light City. You will live a peaceful life as a manor owner in Golden Rock City." Owen's face turned pale. The drastic drop from being a baron to a manor owner was simply unacceptable to him. But if he didn't do this, he wouldn't be able to defend Shining Light City on his own, and his only outcome would be to perish along with the city. Gelée leisurely sipped his red tea, looking down at Owen, whose expression fluctuated wildly. He believed Owen would make the wise choice. Or rather, at this point, Owen had no other path to take. Just then, a frantic series of footsteps echoed from outside. The secretary rushed into the hall, seemingly eager to report something. But he hesitated, catching sight of Gelée and the cloaked man sitting beside him. Owen impatiently waved his hand. "Speak quickly." The secretary hurriedly bowed and said, "My lord, scouts have reported that Blackstone City's army has reached a point 5 kilometers outside the city. They will reach the city gate in at most 1 hour." As soon as the words left his mouth, Owen abruptly stood up from his chair, his panic impossible to suppress. How did they get here so quickly? He then realized his outburst, hastily composed himself, and forced a calm demeanor as he waved his hand. "Send word to Dario. Order him to lead the troops to defend the city. We must not allow the Blackstone City forces to enter even a single step." NOV.LB/JNN. After the secretary acknowledged and withdrew, Owen hesitated no longer and quickly turned to Gelée. "Envoy, I agree. I'll go to Golden Rock City with you." Gelée set down his teacup, a faint smile on his lips. "A wise decision. Please wait for me a moment, envoy. I will have my belongings packed." While fleeing, he needed to take his possessions with him. He needed money to purchase land if he was to become a manor owner. He had to hurry and pack his valuables before the Blackstone City troops launched their attack. To avoid displeasing Gelée, Owen handed him a small pouch of gold coins. "Thank you, envoy." Gelée weighed the pouch in his hand, a wider smile spreading across his face. "Baron, there's no need to rush. Please be at ease. With Lord Ho Chi here, even if the Blackstone City army surrounds Shining Light City, we can leave safely." Owen looked at the cloaked man beside him in surprise. Since entering the council chamber, the cloaked man had remained silent, sitting quietly without a word. He had assumed the cloaked man was Gelée's bodyguard. But from Gelée's tone, this cloaked man named Ho Chi seemed to be of no lesser standing. "I don't know who Lord Ho Chi is." Just as Owen was about to probe the cloaked man's identity, he heard a commotion outside, causing him to frown. He was about to call for guards to investigate when he saw Ho Chi suddenly stand up, Something's wrong. There's a scream. It's an assassin. Assassin? Owen was doubtful. The Blackstone City Army was 10 kilometers away, and his mansion was heavily guarded. What kind of assassin could break in? However, Owen soon had no need to doubt. Shouts of battle quickly approached the council chamber, then suddenly fell silent. Following that, a figure slowly stepped into the chamber. Upon recognizing the face of the newcomer, Owen's eyes widened in shock. Sun-An. Jalet's gaze narrowed. He instinctively straightened his back, his interest peaked as he looked at the young man standing at the entrance. Was this the rumored wizard from Blackstone City? Sun-An's eyes swept across the three individuals in the chamber. Lingering for a moment on Ho-Chi, his eyes narrowed slightly, and he chuckled wryly. It seems I came at the right time. Are you three discussing how to escape? Not bothering to answer Sun-An's playful words, Owen subconsciously took a step back, his face contorted in terror as he yelled, "Help! Someone help! There's an assassin!" The sharp voice, distorted by fear, made Guyler frown. He looked at Owen, a touch of disdain flashing in his eyes. The enemy had already entered the house. Even a fool would know that the guards must have been killed, yet he was still yelling like an idiot. What a disgrace. How come he hadn't noticed this guy's foolishness before? Owen realized his blunder as well, his face turning pale, his forehead slick with cold sweat. Guyler ignored the fool, turning to Sun-An with a light chuckle and a playful tone. Sun-An Arnest, I've heard of you, the legendary wizard. The Marquis praised you as a promising young man. How about considering serving the Marquis? With enough merit, forget about a mere baron title. Even a viscount title can be bestowed upon you by the Marquis. Who are you? Sun-An glanced at Guyler. Guyler Konos, the Marquis of Gold Rock's envoy. Guyler slightly raised his chin, arrogance evident in his tone. So you're just a dog of the Marquis of Gold Rock. Sun-An shook his head. Guyler's smile faltered, his face quickly becoming grim. He said coldly, "Young man, don't be so arrogant. Don't think that you're invincible just because you've become a wizard. There are plenty of people in this world who are stronger than you." Sun-An chuckled, seeing that Sun-An remained unmoved, treating him with utter disregard. Guyler was finally completely angered. His face turned cold and sharp. "It seems you're just a fool who can't see the situation. I overestimated you. Someone like you is not worthy of serving the Marquis. N/O/vel/B//in.C////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////// Hodge, I'll leave it to you. The last sentence was addressed to the cloaked man beside him. Hodge nodded, tearing off his cloak to reveal a weathered face of around 40, beneath which was silver-bright scale armor and a steel longsword. I've heard many tales of wizards, but this is the first time I've met one. I hope you won't disappoint me. Hodge looked at Su Nan with burning eyes, a vibrant fighting spirit glimmering in them. Without waiting for Su Nan's response, he swung his sword towards the front. Amidst the ear-splitting sound of air being cleaved, a crimson flame, sword chi formed out of thin air as the blade passed through, slashing towards Su Nan like a lightning bolt. Elemental power. Su Nan's eyes narrowed. He didn't dodge, an invisible shield instantly shifting in front of him, blocking the flame, sword chi. Hodge wasn't disappointed by his missed attack. He leaped forward, striking at Su Nan like a bolt of lightning. Su Nan casually flicked out a bolt of lightning, slightly hindering Hodge, using the opportunity to quickly retreat, leaving the hall in a flash. Watching the two charge out of the hall, Owen was dumbfounded, his face filled with shock. Elemental power. Lord Hodge is a legendary knight. Guyler laughed triumphantly. I told you, with Lord Hodge around, there's no need to worry. Snapping out of his shock, Owen felt a surge of immense joy, as if he had been transported from hell to heaven. A legendary knight was the top combat force in the duchy. A single legendary knight could take on dozens of great knights. With a legendary knight around, what did he have to fear? The panic and fear in Owen's heart vanished, replaced by an expression of utter excitement. The two immediately exited the hall. The originally tranquil and elegant courtyard was now a mess, filled with debris and broken stones. Hodge, wielding a long sword blazing with fiery flames, continued his fierce assault on Sunan. Sunan was almost pinned down, unable to dodge, only able to rely on his shield and protective ring to defend, occasionally raising his hand to release lightning and wind to counterattack. Fire, lightning, and wind intertwined, creating deafening roars that shook the air. Unlike great knights who relied on their own generated martial energy, legendary knights had already transcended their physical limitations to a certain degree, capable of communicating with the free energy particles in nature. They were similar to second-rank wizard apprentices, already having grasped the basics of manipulating energy particles. The difference was that most legendary knights could only transform single energy particles into a single element, unlike wizard apprentices who could manipulate multiple energy particles with more diverse techniques. But even so, legendary knights who had mastered elemental power were vastly different from great knights in terms of combat strength. To put it simply, they transformed from pure physical warriors into magic martial hybrid warriors. They were also magic martial warriors who could absorb energy particles to replenish their consumption, significantly enhancing their endurance. Legendary knights who had mastered elemental power could already achieve the feat of 1 against 1,000 on the battlefield, enough to influence the outcome of a small-scale battle. Because of their strength and rarity, legendary knights had rarely appeared on the battlefield in recent years. They were more often treated as strategic weapons, and were not easily deployed. To be honest, encountering a legendary knight here was truly unexpected for Sunan. He, a second-rank wizard apprentice, was indeed facing a challenge against such a powerful individual. Just then, Sunan's expression changed slightly, a hint of a smile playing on his lips. At the same time, Hodge seemed to sense something, and he swung his sword towards his side. Clunk! A burst of sparks suddenly erupted in the empty void. A low, rumbling sound accompanied it. Hodge slashed out a wave of fire, the intense heat warping the air slightly, faintly outlining the silhouette of a beast with fur limbs. It quickly transformed into an ethereal form, dodging the flames while retreating to Sunan's side, emitting a low growl. Sunan chuckled softly. Good job. Hodge narrowed his eyes, focusing intently on the area beside Sunan. Although it was empty, he seemed to be able to clearly perceive the stealthy dragon's location. Exactly as the intelligence reported, a strange beast that can perfectly conceal itself. But if you think this will win you the victory, then you're seriously underestimating a legendary knight. At the level of a legendary knight, judging an enemy's location was no longer solely reliant on eyesight. It was more about perception. Unless they could conceal their aura, even if they completely eliminated their shape, sound, and smell, legendary knights would still be able to determine their location through perception. At the entrance of the hall, Guyler watched this scene, a disdainful expression on his face. It's useless, Sunan. A legendary knight's power is beyond your imagination. Your little tricks are useless against Lord Hodge. Facing Guyler's mockery, Sunan didn't even bother to respond. In terms of understanding legendary knights, everyone present, including Hodge himself, probably knew less than him. In his previous life, he had killed hundreds, if not dozens, of legendary knights. Among them were even legendary knights who had mastered spatial power. In comparison, Hodge was just average. Although he was a bit tricky, it wasn't like he had no way to deal with him. Time to spend money again. Sunan sighed, flipped his wrist, and several shimmering rune gems appeared in his palm. Is that a gem? Guyler frowned in confusion, staring at the gem in Sunan's hand from afar. But soon, he dismissed his doubts. What did it matter how powerful a wizard was? Wasn't he still suppressed by Lord Ho Chi? Even with that beast by his side, Sunan couldn't possibly be Ho Chi's opponent. From the moment Sunan appeared, his fate had been sealed. Either submit or die. It could only be said that the young man was too proud, always thinking he was mighty, not realizing the world was far vaster than he imagined. You have good luck. Guyler turned to Owen, grinning gleefully. Once Sunan is dead, the the Blackstone City Army's morale will plummet. You might use this chance to strike a heavy blow against your enemy. The envoy is right. Owen's expression was equally filled with excitement. Eliminating Su Nen wouldn't solve the current predicament immediately, but at least it would give them a breather. There was a chance they could defeat Blackstone City and regain control of the Shining Light territory. Thinking about it, Owen was ecstatic, his eyes glued to the battle in the courtyard, eager for Su Nen to be killed by Ho Chi the next second. The battle resumed after a brief pause. Just as Ho Chi himself said, the stealth dragon's invisibility ability was almost useless against him. Every time the dragon attacked, the moment it transitioned from an intangible state to a physical form, Ho Chi instantly detected and captured its location, easily blocking the attack while leaving several scorched wounds on the dragon's body. The stealth dragon is still barely capable of dealing with a legendary knight. Unless it fully transforms its bloodline into subdragon blood, it should have the strength to fight a legendary knight. Su Nen pondered silently. But with the stealth dragon distracting Ho Chi, his situation became much easier. He flicked his wrist and threw out a rune gem. Boom! The gem exploded in midair, transforming into countless winding thunder serpents that cascaded down, enveloping Ho Chi completely. The boundless power made Ho Chi's face twitch. He retreated quickly, simultaneously slashing a fiery sword energy towards the sky above. Crackle! Despite his quick reaction and the fire sword energy annihilating most of the thunder, Ho Chi was still hit by the remaining lightning, his body stiffening for a moment, the radiant aura of his martial energy fluctuating violently. What kind of technique is that? Ho Chi was horrified. The power of that blow was far more terrifying than any of Su Nan's previous attacks. Even with his dual defenses of fire element power and martial energy, he was injured. But reality didn't give Ho Chi time to think. As Su Nan threw out another rune gem, the second wave of attacks came immediately. This time, countless dark, profound rays of light swarmed in. Shadow corrosion. Without even time to react, Ho Chi was hit directly, feeling a sudden chill in his body, as if an invisible shackle was put on him. His movements became noticeably sluggish. Even the mobilization of martial energy and the manipulation of energy particles felt rusty, with a touch of stiffness. Not far away, Su Nan threw out 3 more gems. After lightning and shadow, fire, frost, and hurricane swept out once more, covering the sky and earth, heading towards Ho Chi. Facing a legendary knight, Su Nan went all out, transforming into a human cannon, continuously throwing rune gem after rune gem. In just 4 or 5 breaths, he had consumed over 20 rune gems. By then, Ho Chi was completely stunned. He felt like he was being besieged by multiple legendary knights, with elemental attacks of different attributes coming from all directions at every moment. Faced with such a torrential onslaught, he couldn't even recover by absorbing energy particles. The radiant aura of his martial energy quickly shattered and dissipated. After enduring several attacks with his flesh and blood, Ho Chi had frostbite, wind blade cuts, and thunder burns all over him, looking utterly miserable, completely lacking his previous spirited fighting intent. Damn it! Since his ascension to Legendary Knight, when had Ho Chi ever been this humiliated? His intense anger erupted with 12-fold strength, allowing him to forcefully withstand the onslaught of lightning and frost, charging ferociously towards Su Nan. Then he saw Su Nan spread out his hand, 6 rune gems in his palm, shining with alluring brilliance. NOV.L.B/JNN. Never had Ho Chi wanted to swear as much as he did now. How many gems did this damn kid have? Unfortunately, he would never know the answer. In the next instant, the raging elemental attacks engulfed him. Boom! A violent shockwave spread out from where Ho Chi stood, blowing gravel and stones into a frenzy. Even Guyler and Owen, who were quite a distance away, were pushed back several steps by the oncoming wind, the gravel hitting their faces, causing some pain. However, the two of them had no time to care about anything else, just staring blankly at the center of the courtyard, their mouths wide open in disbelief. How could this have happened? Wasn't Ho Chi still holding the upper hand just now? Why was he beaten into such a pathetic state in the blink of an eye? What the hell was going on? Huff! The wind blew away the smoke and dust, revealing the situation in the center of the courtyard. Ho Chi, covered in frost and scorches, lay motionless on the ground, lifeless. Looking at the corpse on the ground, Su Nan felt a slight pang of regret. A legendary knight's soul, at least enough to create a small soul crystal, but he couldn't extract souls from corpses yet. What a waste! Taking back his gaze, Su Nan turned to Gyler and Owen. Meeting Su Nan's gaze, the two of them shuddered involuntarily, taking a step back subconsciously, their faces pale. Su Nan, sir, we can still talk about it, Duke Jinyin, Gyler stammered, his face filled with terror, completely losing his previous smugness and arrogance. Unfortunately, Su Nan had no intention of talking to him. Lightning flashed at his fingertips, a bolt of electricity instantly piercing Gyler's forehead. The envoy, his eyes wide with terror and despair, collapsed to the ground. Owen was terrified, his heart pounding in his chest. He fell to his knees with a thud, pleading with terror in his eyes. Su Nan, please spare me. I don't want the title anymore. I'll give it back to you. Just please spare my life, please. Before he could finish, he was hit by Su Nan's sleep curse, falling into unconsciousness. Killing you like this is too easy. You belong in the execution grounds. Su Nan turned towards the city gate, patting the stealth dragon that was approaching. Go, smash open the gate, welcome Big Brother and the others into the city. The stealth dragon let out a roar, disappearing quickly. Not long after, there was a loud boom from the direction of the gate, the end of the winter loop moon. The snow had yet to completely melt. The revival wind was still a while away, yet the entire Golden Rock province was subtly restless. Two recent events had sent the noble circles of Golden Rock province into a frenzy. The first involved Storm territory. After a coma lasting half a year, the Storm Earl was finally declared deceased. His title, unexpectedly, was inherited by his youngest son. At the subsequent succession ceremony, the Golden Rock Marquis attended and bestowed blessings upon the new Storm Earl. The second event was the transfer of the Shining Baron title once again. To be honest, many nobles had anticipated this outcome. However, the details of the event were somewhat unexpected. Blackstone City conquered Shining Light City almost without bloodshed. N/O/vel/B//and .C//OM. According to the battle report, upon the arrival of the Blackstone City army at the outskirts of Shining Light City, the city gates shattered, and several commanders were torn apart, dying tragically in full view of all. Therefore, even before the war started, the Shining Light City garrison crumbled. The Blackstone City army then marched directly into the city and took control of the entire Shining Light City without much effort. This result left many speechless. More astute observers, upon reading the battle report, guessed the role Su Nan played in this victory. After the war, numerous nobles awaited the Golden Rock Marquis' reaction. After all, everyone knew that Owen was backed by the Golden Rock Marquis. Now that Owen had been executed by hanging, and the Shining Baron title had changed hands, if the Golden Rock Marquis did nothing, his prestige would undoubtedly plummet. But what surprised everyone was that a considerable time passed after the war, and the Golden Rock Marquis remained completely silent. He allowed the new Shining Baron, K. Arnest, to easily conquer the entire Shining territory and gradually solidify his position as Baron. Many nobles were baffled. Only a few nobles close to the Golden Rock Marquis, such as Earl Winterfrost, Viscount Blackthorn, and Viscount Feathersnake, understood what the Marquis feared. Golden Rock City, Inner Fort. Guided by the steward, two cloakmen walked through the courtyard and into the bright, spacious corridor. Expensive oil paintings hung on both sides of the corridor. Sunlight streamed in from the windows, making the gilded frames sparkle. Casper trailed behind, his gaze sweeping over a painting, his lips twitching slightly. He remembered this oil painting of the Thornflower Princess. It had appeared at a major auction not long ago and fetched a price of 3,800 gold coins. Yet, Now it was casually hanging on the corridor. Looking at the dozens of other paintings on the corridor, estimated to be worth no less than the Thornflower Princess, Casper couldn't help but silently admire the scene. They say the Golden Rock Marquis is rich enough to rival a nation. Now, it seems the rumors were true. In this world, gold equals power. No wonder the Golden Rock Marquis wasn't content with simply being a local overlord. As they walked, the three arrived at a room at the end of the corridor. The steward raised his hand and gently knocked on the door, saying, "Lord, the two guests have arrived. Come in." A deep, resonant voice echoed from within. The steward gently opened the door, then stepped aside, gesturing for the two to enter. Entering the study, the Golden Rock Marquis stood by the window, gazing at the sky outside with a solemn expression, lost in thought. Just 2 months ago, the Golden Rock Marquis had turned 60, but his black hair remained glossy, and his skin was firm and rosy. Anyone seeing him would believe he was only in his early 30s. Priest Iolaus, long time no see. Turning around, a hint of a smile appeared on the Golden Rock Marquis's rugged face as he gestured for the two to sit down. "Long time no see, Marquis. It brings me joy to see you well." After the Golden Rock Marquis took his seat, Iolaus also sat opposite him. As for Casper, he stood aside. He hadn't yet earned the privilege of sitting before these two. "Getting old. My body's starting to decline. The old injuries from the wars keep flaring up. Time is relentless, you see." "Marquis, you're joking. Your health is far sturdier than mine." After exchanging a few pleasantries like ordinary friends, the Golden Rock Marquis finally brought up the main topic. "Priest Iolaus has come all this way to see me. Surely you didn't just come to chat." Iolaus's smile faded, and his expression turned serious. "My purpose in coming to see you, Marquis, is for the sake of Su Nan." The moment the name Su Nan was mentioned, a barely perceptible shadow flickered across the Golden Rock Marquis's face, and his gaze suddenly sharpened. Casper unconsciously stiffened. At this moment, the Golden Rock Marquis truly displayed a hint of the sharpness of the overlord of Golden Rock Province, a veteran legendary knight. "Su Nan? He's crossed paths with your sect." The Golden Rock Marquis raised an eyebrow and asked. In his memory, the only connection between Su Nan and the Starfire sect was the incident where the sect sent people to assassinate him in Blackstone City. Before, he couldn't figure out why the Starfire sect assassins failed, but after the Blackstone City battle report was released, the truth became clear. Even Ho Chi died at Su Nan's hands. Two mere junior great knights. Failing to assassinate someone was normal. But that assassination was commissioned by Owen. Even if it failed, there was no reason for the Starfire sect to hold a grudge against Su Nan. However, the following words from Iolaus left the Golden Rock Marquis slightly surprised. "To be honest, Marquis, our sect suffered heavy casualties at our stronghold in Stone Bell City 2 months ago. We lost 6 priests and over 100 disciples. The culprit behind this devastation is a wizard. He also happens to possess a beast with the ability to conceal itself." A flash of understanding crossed the Golden Rock Marquis's eyes. A beast capable of concealment was extremely rare. The probability of 2 such beasts appearing in Golden Rock Province simultaneously was incredibly low. And since both manipulators were wizards, the probability became even lower. No wonder the Starfire sect was so certain that the person was Su Nan. But how did Su Nan know about your stronghold in Stone Bell City? The Golden Rock Marquis knew that the Starfire sect members possessed techniques to resist torture. No one could extract any information from these fanatics. If it weren't for this, he wouldn't have been so comfortable cooperating with the Starfire sect in assassinating nobles. This remains unclear to us. Iolaus's eyes twitched slightly, then his expression turned cold. "But Su Nan has killed so many of our disciples. We will never forgive him. My reason for seeing you, Marquis, is to join forces with you against Su Nan. If you decide to attack Shining Territory, we will lend you our strength." The Golden Rock Marquis lightly tapped the table with his finger and smiled faintly. "Your sect's willingness to help is greatly appreciated. However, it is not yet time to deal with Shining Territory." "Then when?" Iolaus frowned slightly. He wasn't really eager to kill Sunan, but the divine blood crystal was still in the other's possession. This object was of paramount importance to the sect. They couldn't rest easy until they retrieved it. The golden rock marquis rose and walked to the window, gazing southward with a deep look in his eyes. We'll wait for a storm that will sweep across the entire duchy. Hurry up, we must transport everything to the destination before nightfall. A transport convoy slowly rolled through the cobblestone roads of Shining Light City, the grinding sound of wheels forming a continuous chorus. Residents along the way automatically stepped aside, for a troop of fully armed soldiers followed the convoy. The leading men wore full armor, making it clear they were knights. Shining Light City is indeed better. Blackstone City is ultimately too remote. Looking at the scenery along the streets, Jordan grinned and sighed. Shining Light City's architectural style leaned towards Roman, giving it a majestic and dignified feeling. The roads were paved with smooth cobblestones. Flowers and trees were planted on both sides. The ground was clean and tidy, and there were complete sewer systems. Even the houses were more exquisite and well-ordered than those in Blackstone City. Compared to Shining Light City, Blackstone City immediately felt like a rural area. When we followed Lord K to Blackstone City, who could have imagined that we would return to Shining Light territory so quickly? A knight sighed. The rest of the group also looked wistful. Who says otherwise? I thought I would stay in Blackstone City forever. Yeah, I still doubt if I am dreaming. All this is thanks to Lord Baron and Lord Sunan. But speaking of which, why did Lord Sunan move to the outskirts of the city? Could it be? The knight's words were cut off by Jordan's kick. What are you rambling about? Watch your mouth. Lord Baron and his brother have a good relationship. Besides, Lord Sunan obviously has no interest in the title. He will be a wizard in the future. Then why didn't Lord Sunan stay in the city? The outskirts are so desolate. How could living there be as comfortable as the inner castle? A knight questioned. Jordan shrugged and said, I heard that Lord Sunan wants to build a base outside the city. He said he wants to build a magical plant garden and a puppet factory, which requires a large amount of land. So he chose the outskirts. The materials we are transporting this time are for building the base. Seeing the confused faces, Jordan impatiently waved his hand. Anyway, we just need to do what Lord Sunan says. Everyone agreed. Lord Sunan's plans, a powerful being like him. How could they casually speculate? They just need to follow through. The convoy passed through the city and went north for 4 or 5 kilometers after exiting the city gate before finally seeing a piece of land that had been leveled. Many workers were busy working tirelessly. The crisp sound of iron picks hitting rocks was endless. Jordan quickly found Sunan, who was surveying the hillside, seemingly searching for something. Lord Sunan, Lord Baron has asked me to deliver things. Sunan nodded, called a steward, and asked him to receive the goods. Then he took out a list and handed it to Jordan. This is what we'll need next. Please deliver it to my brother. Yes, my lord, Jordan solemnly replied, secretly glancing at the list. Crystals, brass, silver, clay. The first few were understandable, but what was the clay for? Making ceramics? Jordan secretly wondered, but he was smart enough not to ask. He took the list and left Sunan. After he left, Sunan continued to explore the surrounding area. After taking over Shining Light City, he followed his plan and started his farming project. He immediately found Kay and marked out a piece of land on the plain not far from the city, preparing to build his own base. A qualified wizard must have his own territory to practice and study knowledge in peace, and to develop himself. So many wizards build their own wizard towers. A few powerful true spirit wizards even spend vast amounts of resources building floating cities. Unfortunately, neither floating cities nor wizard towers were something Sunan could afford right now. He could only settle for a regular base. A complete base must include a meditation area, spell training area, experimental area, living area, potion-making area, magical plant garden, magical item workshop, puppet factory, warehouse, and other facilities. Building so many facilities, the base's area would even be bigger than a regular village. The cost in gold was also in the tens of thousands. Luckily, Sunan had made a batch of potions in his spare time and sold them to the Firefox Trading Company. The deposit he received could be used for the initial construction of the base. What he was exploring now was the location of the Earth vein node. Every world's underground has its own original magic vein network. These networks are called Earth vein nodes or element branches, magic nodes, and so on. The name is just a code. Essentially, Earth vein nodes are where the energy of nature intersects. As long as a large-scale magic array is set up at the Earth vein node to provide a magic supply channel, it can provide stable magic transmission, which can greatly save energy. Otherwise, relying solely on magic stones to support facilities like magical plant gardens, magic item workshops, and puppet factories would not be enough even if the entire income of Shining Light territory was invested. The only problem was that the Starlight continent was now poor in elements, and the Earth vein nodes could only provide a significantly reduced amount of elemental magic. Relying only on the Earth vein nodes, it could probably only support the daily operation and maintenance of the base. If he wanted to use magic energy crystal forging furnaces and other equipment, he had to use magic stones as supplementary energy. In view of this, a batch of magic stones must be stockpiled before the completion of the base. After determining the location of the Earth vein node, Sunan took a deep breath and turned to look at the busy crowd below. Building the base entirely by manpower is still a bit inefficient. It's better to make a batch of clay golems to act as manpower. Clay golems have a strength close to a ton and are highly efficient labor. In many large projects, one clay golem can handle the work equivalent to hundreds of humans. The key point is that clay golems do not need to rest or eat. As long as there is enough energy supply and regular maintenance, they can be used indefinitely. Therefore, many wizards like to use clay golems as laborers or servants. Clay golems require simple materials, consume little energy, and are easy to maintain, making them the best choice for labor. With 10 clay golems, the construction efficiency of the base can increase several times, and it can also save a lot of labor costs. In addition, places like the Magical Plant Garden and the Magic Item Workshop also require special personnel to maintain. Besides literacy, they also need to master some basic magical plant knowledge or enchanting knowledge, which need to be cultivated from scratch. n/o/vel/b/and.c//om. Cultivation, learning spells, building bases, making potions, forging golems, training personnel. Suddenly, Sunan realized that he had a lot to do. I have a lot to do next.